Hello and welcome back to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale, and we're back to the normal crew. No insane crowd of people this week. Let's go through them. We have Josh Torres.
Think about this past week of everything that was announced. I'm not sure if 2021 is real.
We will go into that. We have Adam Vitale.
Hello.
We have Chow Min Woo.
Hello.
And James Galizio.
Poor George. He's not here, and you said it's the usual crew.
I feel bad. Well, Chow is just as good, if not better. There.
That's even worse.
Well, George is at a friend's birthday party, so he is not available this week. We're all trying to avoid the heat. We're all trying to avoid all the thunderstorms, at least across the U.S. this week. It's been a couple in my area. And obviously a lot of gaming news. Not a lot in terms of new releases, but a lot in terms of looking ahead to things that we weren't really expecting. So when we were discussing the podcast last week, we had some internal discussions about kind of how we wanted to organize the start of this thing. And it's not going to feel too different, but we're just sort of going to transpose it, where we're going to be focusing on targeting specific games or news bits to talk about at the front, rather than round robining through the participants. And then we were discussing that this week, and we're like, what do we want to talk about first? And a kind of a surprise contender, just literally minutes before this podcast, that everyone really wants to talk about, at least from the participants here. And that is, you're not gonna be able to predict this, I don't think. And that is the Steam Deck. So this is kind of out of nowhere. Well, maybe not completely out of nowhere. I think insiders have mentioned that Valve, this is a Valve product, the developers behind Steam, that had been working on hardware. They've always had R&D on hardware, and then this is what they've come up with. The Steam Deck was announced, which is essentially a portable computer, a Switch-like console device used to play Steam, and we've learned since then, any PC games compatible with the Steam OS, or even with Windows if it's dual booted. So there's a lot to go in here, and I kind of want to figure out how to parse this particularly. It's a Switch-like device. It's coming with 3 models. We'll go into the details of that shortly. You can pre-order online at Steam's website.
It's coming. First shipment start this December.
Yeah. Yes. So you can reserve a pre-order for $5, or you can go to eBay and get scalped if you want to do that for some reason. This obviously is coming off the heels of the announcement of the Switch OLED version, which a lot of people were going into thinking it might have been an updated like Switch Pro, Switch 2 sort of device. And it ended up, we kind of already talked about that, and it really kind of wasn't. It was more of not even a half step, more just kind of a refresh more than anything. And depending on your stance on PC gaming or your stance on Nintendo gaming, I suppose, some people are like, this is what the Switch Pro should have been, or at least something in line with this, or, depending on how fervent you are about emulating Nintendo titles, this might replace your need for a Switch Pro entirely. It just kind of depends on your viewpoint, on your gaming habits, on your preferences. What do we think about what Valve has shown with the Steam Deck? Let's start with James, because I think he is the one, based on my estimation, that has been the most eager to go into discussing this.
I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I definitely am pretty damn excited. I'll say that much. I'll be honest. So the rumors for this have been kind of floating around for a couple of weeks now, and I say rumors, but more so there was like a leak from Valve's, like basically everything that Valve does, everything that happens on Steam is kind of combed over with a fine-tooth comb. And there was rumors about something like this on Steam for the last couple of weeks because of stuff that people found on Steam's own website. And actually, apparently, there's like a little cheeky reference to that in the final like published announcement, because there's like something like about, remember to delete this file on the website.
I remember reading some generic rumors that they were working on hardware, but I don't think that this is particularly what people had in mind. Were people nailing it down that it would be a handheld device?
Yeah, recall that this is not the first time Steam has made hardware. You had the Steam machines from back then. You had the Steam Link. You had the Steam controller. So
the Vive and the Index.
Yep, it's not their first foray into hardware, but it's definitely, you can definitely see that this is a reaction to the Nintendo Switch concept. It's like, okay, what can we do to really unify like the experiences that we've learned over the years about investing in hardware, what do people really want, what makes sense. And I think the end result with this initial Steam Deck concept is very alluring and appealing because they're very open that this is just a PC just as a handheld. And the three options that they give for the three SKUs that they give for this are pretty smart because the entry price is relatively low, even though it's just $400. Even though it's at 64 gigabytes, it has an expandable micro SD slot. So for people who really want like some sort of like indie machine or low maintenance type of games or visual novels, you can get it at that really low price, relatively speaking. As we move up, you have 256 and 512 gigabytes, both priced at $530 USD and 649 US dollars, respectively. And the main difference between that initial 64 gigabyte and these other models is that the internal storage of that 64 gigabyte is eMMC. So these are all SSDs, but there are different like standards of SSDs. So eMMC is still fast, but not as fast as the NVMe standard that's in the 256 to 512.
For a point of reference, the Switch OLED edition is $350. So this is $50 more for a base edition for a if you're only like blind-eyed by just the specs itself, or a much stronger piece of equipment for $50 more. So you might like lament the lack of storage or other limitations of the base model, but in comparison directly to the Switch OLED, it doesn't look too bad, I don't think.
No, I don't
It's a very compelling price, that's for sure.
Yeah. Go on, Jim. Sorry to cut you off like that.
No, it's fine. Basically, the specs themselves are really fascinating because, for all intents and purposes, it's the closest thing we have to a next gen handheld. Like, basically, before Nintendo even had a chance to release an actual Switch Pro or a Switch 2, the specs for this thing are very impressive. So it's a 4-core, 8-thread Zen 2 APU with and let's see the actual like clock speed for this thing on the tech specs. Basically, base clock speed is 2.4 gigahertz up to 3.5 gigahertz. So it's basically about half of an Xbox Series S CPU. The GPU is 8 RDNA 2 compute units, up to 1.6 teraflops, floating point 32, and this is overall package power of like 15 watts.
How many game cubes is that?
Basically, this is its power. The best way to say to put it is that based off of all the specs, and not even talking about the RAM, which is LPDDR5, 16 gigabytes of it, which is really impressive as well. This is stronger than the PS4. Like on paper, this is stronger than the PS4. Any game that, for example, would run at like 1080p 30 on a PS4 should have no issues running at similar settings at 720p 60 on Steam Deck.
Yeah, this is an interesting approach that Steam did with Valve did specifically on this Steam Deck, where they kind of, as James mentioned, just on paper, they kind of went overkill on the specs because what this is really targeting for just when you're playing on handheld is a 720p standard. So what they're basically doing is really upping the specs for a really smooth 720p performance. So you're not expecting 1080p or 4K obviously out of this because that'd be really heavy on the battery. So what they're doing is you're gonna get really smooth gameplay running probably medium to high specs on a lot of modern AAA games, but they're going to be running at 720p. But you're still getting a great performance because of these specs.
Yeah, and just to put in perspective, the specs here, particularly with the CPU, this will be able to, without a doubt, emulate like up to Wii U games. A decent amount of PS3 titles as well, though obviously the PS3 is a bit of a different beast. Switch emulation is still developing, but it seems like there's actually a distinct possibility, as weird, as funny as it is, that this might end up being a Switch Pro once you emulate Switch games.
Yeah, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people installing Switch emulators on this thing and then just say, hey, look, Hyrule Warriors runs at 60 FPS on this thing or something.
was it? I was gonna say, these things are kind of in the market for a while, but never made
Yeah.
by like a big name publisher, or whatever you like to call
Like,
it.
yeah, the GPD Win 3, and you had the Aya Neo, and those were like, from what I can understand, they were like good, solid systems, but like the base price for an Aya Neo, for example, which is the most comparable to this, with a weaker GPU, but a slightly stronger CPU, because with 6 cores, 6 threads versus 4 cores, 8 threads, that thing started at over $800. So for half the price, you get a system that overall is stronger and is made by a North American company that you'll generally have a better time dealing with warranties and stuff with.
Yeah, I think the key thing here that's really it really blows this market open. It's always existed, as you said, Chow, but I think the key distinction here is the price, the starting price, and then even like the high end model, the 512 model, is still quite less expensive than the starting price of some of the
Yeah,
other
I was looking at it.
competitors.
It's like I gotta get
Yeah,
that model. It's like, it seems
Yeah, the
pretty
high end
fair.
model is $650 in US dollars. When I'm like, what is a GPD Win 3? Like $1,000? Yes.
Yeah,
So,
$1,000.
but the thing is, though, is Josh brought this up earlier. Like, Valve has worked on hardware before, and I think their record is kind of spotty. Like, obviously, the Valve Index it has been well received, and it seems, at least, I don't have firsthand experience, well received, and a lot of people swear by it as a go-to VR headset. But then I look at the Steam Link and the Steam controller, which kind of had like a flash of support that ended up going away pretty quickly, and those things are kind of like dead and abandoned. And then there's like even
Well,
like
fifth time's a
Steam
charm,
Big,
maybe.
yeah, Steam Big Picture hasn't seen an update in forever. They did finally update like the storefront UI and the platform, like the Friends GUI and all that, but it's their record isn't spotless, so it kind of makes me like hesitant to jump on right away, because is this just going to see like a year and a half of support and then it's just kind of like left up to the community to just keep it running? Like maybe the community will be fervent enough that that'll be acceptable, but it's just, I don't know, I'm hesitant, maybe irrationally so.
One thing I will say is that, yeah, I'm not even sure if calling their record spotty is necessarily fair, specifically because the Steam Link, the only reason they stopped supporting it is because it became obsolete, because you could end up just doing in-home streaming through a smart TV. Or you could do it through a number of different methods. Like, the whole reason they sold the Steam Link was because people didn't have access to something that would be able to run like the software necessary to in-home stream from your desktop PC and like your office all the way to the living room.
The people
And
who
they
do use a Steam Link like swear by it too. Like the technology works, and for the people that I know that still use a Steam Link, they're like, "No, this is great for my setup. I love it."
Yeah, and not to mention, like, once they cut out the actual hardware, they just said, here's all the software to make your own like Steam Links with like a Raspberry Pi or something. Yeah, you can say, oh, they just kept selling the actual hardware, but it got to the point where it didn't make any sense to, because most people, if you have a smart TV, there's methods for you to do it through there. And the Steam controller, similarly, I think the issue with that was they got into an unfortunate lawsuit with, I forget the name of the company. I think it was like, there was a controller company that has a patent for paddles on controllers, and that's the main reason why you don't see more controllers with paddles on the back. I actually think that the ultimate decision the courts came to makes no sense based off of what the actual patent is, because like the whole deal with the patent there is more similar to like the Xbox Elite controller, where you have this bespoke buttons on the back of the controller that you can take off, put on, that sort of thing. Whereas the Steam controller, it's like one solid piece. Basically, the back plate for the entire controller is one solid piece, and then the edges of it work as buttons if you press them in. So I still think that the end result of that is kind of...
So there's extenuating circumstances in both cases. So okay, that does
I
alleviate
think-
my anxiety a bit.
I think the only real like blunder, because like kind of like a starting point, were the Steam machines that Valve put out, or like when they partnered
And
with
even
third
then,
parties.
with the Steam machines, the two problems with that were that there just wasn't enough support for Linux gaming at the time. We'll get to that later. And two, Valve, besides the prototype, didn't actually release any Steam machines themselves.
Yeah, they had to they partnered with other third parties to release it for them. They weren't like, it wasn't in house in the way that the
So they
Steam
kind of
Deck
delegated
is.
out, and then it only went as far as
Yeah.
that went.
Yeah, whereas the very first thing they showcase, like they've outright said that they are fine with sharing like all of the software side stuff for the Steam Deck to other companies. So if they want to make something that uses the same sort of idea, they're fine with that. And that makes a lot of sense when you look at kind of what led up to this reveal, because it's clear seeing this, and Linus from Linus Tech Tips said the same thing. Once you've seen this and you look at the actual timeline for stuff like Steam Proton, it is very clear that the Steam like machine initiative never actually went away. They just needed to figure out a better form to eventually put it into. And this makes a lot of sense because, so we already said this is running Linux. This is running SteamOS. It's a new version of SteamOS, like 3.0, that runs on Arch Linux. That doesn't mean much to most people, but if you are a Linux nut like I am, it makes a lot more sense because there's less outdated packages on Arch than there are on Debian, like non-testing. And it's just a better Linux, I'd say. I'm going to cause an argument in the comments for saying that, but
to be clear, to the people who are scared that because this is on Linux, they Valve themselves already said, hey, if you don't want a SteamOS on this, you can actually uninstall SteamOS and you can just replace it with Windows 10 if you so desire.
Can I install Windows on this and then install the Epic Store on this? I want to do that.
And you don't even need to.
It just catches fire.
You don't even need to install. You don't even need to install Windows to install the Epic Store because it works under Proton and Wine and all that. I think for the vast majority of people, like there's tons of folks that are reading up about the SteamOS aspect of it and being like, well, I'll just install Windows because that sounds like a pain. But Linux gaming has come a long way, especially with Proton, and like the majority of games that don't work now are simply due to anti-cheats.
So, and briefly explain what Proton is to the people who don't know, like what Proton is, what are Linux distros, like just a brief summary for those folks.
Okay, so obviously Linux will run on the same hardware as Windows. It's a compatibility layer. Proton's a compatibility layer that allows for games that are developed for Windows operating system to run under Linux. And it's kind of an extension of Wine, which is in a recursive acronym, which is Wine is not an emulator. It's a compatibility layer. Wine has been around for a long time, and it's been useful for a bunch of different things on Linux, allowing for non-native support of Windows applications under the Linux kernel. And Proton is specifically a fork/extension of it that Valve has been working on since 2018 to more specifically run Windows games under Linux. And
if you go on, new? I thought it had been around longer than that.
Well, Wine's been around for a long time, but Proton's only been around since. Nope.
Oh,
but if you go on ProtonDB, you'll see that there's been a lot of support for Proton. Well, let me put it this way. If you look at the top 1,000 games on Steam, 76% of them run using Proton or are native to Linux. And
pretty good.
Many of the ones that don't run, it's specifically because of anti-cheat, which one of the main things that Valve has talked about is that you can run, well, you'll be able to run these games because they're working with the anti-cheat developers to get them working under Proton before this comes out.
Okay, so because I know there was some speculation around the internet concerning Steam Deck and whether it'd be able to run titles like Apex Legends or Destiny 2, and there's like some weird reporting about maybe these won't be able to run at launch because of the anti-cheat. Have they confirmed whether they'll be compatible at day one? Because I know there's some weird like tomfoolery behind what the anti-cheat says about the running under Proton.
Yeah. But basically, the point is that right now, without the anti-cheat stuff, 76% of games are running perfectly fine under Linux. Like 76% of games in the top 1,000 on Steam run under Linux. And that includes games like Monster Hunter World. That includes games like Control. That includes games like basically everything that Valve showed off, and then a bunch of other games that they didn't. And I think for the vast majority of people, they're not going to need to install Windows on this thing because there's simply no reason for them to do so. Because chances are every game that they're going to want to play at launch will be able to play on the thing under Linux using Proton.
Yeah, I think a vast majority of people are just going to do a pick up and play on this thing. But for the people who really want to like dig deep into this device and like use it as like a secondary PC, like they've blown the door wide open on it, and you can feel you are free to go wild with it as you wish.
Oh yeah. Like, I don't want to say like it's great that you can install Windows. I'm just saying that a lot of people I've seen online are acting like, oh, you're going to have to install Windows. And it's especially funny when you've seen people say, oh, well, I'll have to install Windows for emulators. And it's like, no, all emulators are on Linux.
Yeah, I recommend people before you like go off and try to do that, like just it doesn't hurt to just try out and see what you can do on this first without having to uninstall and reinstall a new OS. Just try it out and see if it works first. You don't have to go crazy with it from
this is
minute
not
one.
This is not a situation like with the original Steam machines where there was nothing like Proton. This is in a much better space for just pick up and play Linux gaming than the original Steam machines ever were.
Yeah. Let's talk about the form factor of this thing. So we know that the screen is like roughly around 7 inches, I believe, diagonally. And then it has the dual joystick setup right by the screen, up on top of the corners. And then to the left, by the left control stick, you have the D-pad right beside it to the left. And then for the right side, by the right analog stick, you have the A, B, X, Y buttons. And then right beneath both of those sticks are like mini squares that are serve as touchpads for it. Yeah. And that's to ensure that, even like PC centric games, like let's say RTSs, have some degree of comfortability, and to make sure that like pretty much almost all the games on there, even those that only support mouse input only, like have that. And this concept was borrowed from the previous Steam controller that they released. I'm really curious to see how comfortable it will feel in the hands. Going on with like the form factor for people who haven't seen it yet, up at top you have like where the L1 and R1 triggers would be, and then L2 and R2. I forgot what type of triggers they use, whether
analog.
It's more like okay. And then
it's almost twice the weight of a it's almost twice the weight of a Switch with Joy-Cons attached. It's 1.5 pounds, where the Switch is 0.88.
I wonder if it's like as heavy as like a Wii U pad, because that was comfortable for me when I used that.
I saw some people lamenting that, but I actually prefer a bit of heft in like my controllers.
Yeah,
me too.
I'm okay with that.
I'll be honest. When I first saw the control layout, and I think the one thing everyone's immediately going to talk about is why are the D-pad and the face buttons all the way on the left and right? And then I looked at my DualSense controller and I realized, well, if you look at the orientation of the D-pad and the face buttons to the bumper and the triggers compared to a regular controller, it matches up.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that on a Switch that would be uncomfortable. But the thing you have to understand is that the way that the Steam Deck itself is, like, the contortions of it, there's, like, handles on the far edges for you to grip onto, which means you're going to have more leverage. And the way that your hands will naturally, like, rest, I think it's going to be, like... And IGN, they got a first look on it. They've had hands on, and the people that have already touched the thing said that it's surprisingly comfortable. And then once I actually looked at a regular controller and thought about it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, it looks funky, but I'm pretty sure it'll actually be fairly comfortable to use.
I think pointing out the hand grips is an important piece, because on a Switch, let me look at mine here. Yeah, your fingers that go behind the controller just kind of have to like curl up on themselves, and the Joy-Cons themselves are much smaller. So the fact that you have that extra gripping on the sides of this thing, I think it'll rest more comfortably because with your thumb right below your index and middle finger right below the triggers. So
Yeah.
What about
Of course-
the paddles? You guys ever use like the paddles with like the elite controllers? Because I never.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna mention those. That was a really cool part about it for me because when I look at the face buttons, I'm like, man, that B button placement, that it's slanting just a little, is kind of weird. I'm interested to see if that'll work out and that'll be comfortable. But let's say if I just wanted to read a VN or something, and I don't really want to worry too much about using the buttons for it. I could just use the paddles at the back because those are all configurable. There's 4 paddles at the back, 2 on each side, and kind of like the elite controller, like you were saying. So like you can map like, hey, advance to the next text dialogue by using those instead, and maybe that'll be more comfortable instead of like always having to reach for a face button. So I'm more interested to see like if that is a more comfortable way for me to like get into handheld gaming, like solely playing on handheld, because like when I play handheld and Switch, it's okay, but after a few hours, it kind of gets tiring for my right thumb. So I wonder if using the paddles and not having to stress that right thumb is maybe a more viable way to go for me.
All right. I guess 2 kind of last things I want to talk about with the controls that I haven't really seen people really mention much. It's first off, it has gyros controls. It has like 6 axes of movement. So tilt, rotate, all that sort of deal. Something very interesting is that the tips of the analog sticks have a capacitive sensor where you can have it so that if your thumb is resting on the analog stick, you're not even moving it, that can activate the gyro sensor. And that's, again, perfectly like configurable using Steam input. But you can have it set up that even just touching the analog stick will turn on the gyro. And if you're not touching it, it just won't be on.
Oh, huh. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
So let's shift a little bit more towards unless I'll let you
just
go.
one
What's your
final thing.
thought?
One final thing is like for people who want to really come full circle on how this was inspired by Switch. This can use like it'll have a dock as well, so you can like actually dock it in and then have external output like a TV or something, and use it like that as well.
Yeah, but that dock will come later, so the details on that are a little bit sparse. But I was going to say, let's shift towards like less from the hardware, less from like the OS. Like what is exciting about this? And if possible, if you're clever enough to figure out how to answer this, what's exciting about this for like RPG fans? Like what do you look at on your Steam library or available on a PC or an emulator that you're saying like, once I grab a Steam Deck, I'm really excited for this. I don't know why I thought of this, but the game that first came to mind for me was Trails in the Sky the Third, because as of right now in the in the West in general, that is a game that is kind of like sheltered away on PC. It's like if you're ever telling someone to play that series, it's kind of like the odd duck because you can't get it on Switch, you can't get it on a Sony console. And I know telling someone to buy a Steam Deck to play it isn't exactly like an enticing proposition, but just the thought of being able to play it like in a handheld form factor just is like, maybe that'll feel more appropriate, since obviously the original games were like on PSP and then later ones on Vita. So that's for whatever reason, that's the one that first popped into my head when thinking about what
For
RPGs
me,
to play
I
on
was
this.
thinking about PS2 emulators. You know, there's a lot of like good RPGs for PS2 that got like ROM translations recently. So I'm more interested in playing like a PS2 emulator on the go with this thing. Like, was it like Super Robot Wars OG?
You don't say.
Yeah, that's a good example, right?
Yeah. Straight like following your thought, like strategy RPGs is probably one of the prime genres that the RPG gamers might appeal to, because like some of those stages can be long for some of those games, and just taking it on the go and doing one move at a time while you're doing something will be really appealing. You're not like stuck to just a screen or a computer chair, and you're like, okay, well, I have to like commit to this for a few hours. It's like, hey, if you're watching something with your significant other, and you want to take a few moves while they're watching something and having a good time, like this is the device. This will really open it up.
Yeah, a few games stood out to me specifically for RPG fans. First off, one of the main issues I had with the Utowarumono PC ports was that they're locked to 720p 30 FPS. That's not a problem if you're going to be playing it on a 720p handheld.
Well, there you go.
So suddenly this becomes the best Utowarumono machine. So there's that. The other thing that stood out to me from an emulation standpoint is that I know firsthand that the specs on this thing would be more than enough to emulate Xenoblade Chronicles Cross, which means that if Nintendo is not going to give us a Switch port, you'll still be able to play it on a Switch form factor close enough.
And I saw some
something.
people talking about how the base model has like 64 gigabytes only of internal storage, and how you can't even fit Call of Duty on there or whatever. But I do think that this device, to me anyways, is more well suited for like those indie games or those isometric games or those emulated games where like not these big AAA, like what's the biggest fanciest title I can throw on here and like play it in a PC, I don't want to play like Assassin's Creed Valhalla like this, I don't think. But of course that is a limitation to keep in mind, where if you are going for just the base model, you might be constrained or will be constrained by that by the storage. But if you're going to look at indie titles or AA titles, won't factor in quite as much.
Yeah, I think the biggest appeal of this to me is, hey, I can actually like go lay in bed or lie down on the sofa and go just play my visual novels on Steam. Like I had this visual novel called Baldur's Sky that it's been there for the longest time, but like I can never get around to it because people are like, man, it's really good, but it's really long. I'm like,
yeah.
When I'm like at my PC, I'm like, I want to be doing something else instead of like kind of reading through a VN. Like I like VNs, but like long daunting ones are just like, oh man,
I totally get you. That's the whole reason why I've read so many VNs on my Vita, just because it's perfect to like just lay in bed and like a couple hours before like going to sleep, just like getting some reading in.
Yeah, and some VNs, or not even a VN, but like adventure-ish games. Like I recently finished AI the Somnium Files, and I know that has a Switch version. I didn't get that because I just got it on PC. But the games like that, I'm thinking like, hey, that'd be great to just play portably. Of course, there's a Switch version that I didn't get, but now the
Switch version's not good.
Okay,
I played it on Switch. No, I'm glad that I'll be able to play the sequel on the Steam Deck. Let's just say that.
Okay, I had no idea if the performance was good or not, but I'm glad that I don't have to make that compromise anymore of like, well, should I get it on Switch? No, should I not? But this really marries it together.
So how many of you have put in
like if
pre-order?
you were... Well, I have, and I think that Josh and Chow have as well.
Yeah, I think from just our overall staff, it's I got a pre-order. Chow recently got a pre-order last night after feeling the peer pressure. James and Cullen got one, and George got one.
George
Scott got one too.
Well, I could finally play with him in Guilty Gear Strive, unless that rollback netcode comes first. I mean, the crossplay. I mean,
are we playing Melty? Let's play Melty on these things. I charge you to Steam Deck.
Man. One of my favorite things from the last couple of days is that there's been like discourse in the fighting game community about, oh, should we have like tournaments on PC setups or should we not? And then right as people were agreeing, okay, we'll have to stick to consoles because we don't have a single spec PC that we know what to expect with the hardware, this gets announced.
Yeah, this is actually a really big like inflection point of how future fighting game tournaments can run, because sometimes their performance on console, whether it be to input lag or something else, sometimes it's not ideal, but people deal with it because it's a universal spec that like, okay, everyone can agree to this. It's easy to set up. But now with the Steam Deck, I really wonder if that'll be an adopted standard, because you can output it to TVs if you have docks for it, and then just moving like console, like getting them set up, and then when the tournament is over and getting them out of there is way easier than like say something like a console or definitely PC, because their form factor is just much more portable. So I'm really excited to see that if maybe Steam Deck somehow becomes the universal standard for fighting game tournament machines. That'd be weird.
I'll tell you one thing right now. People are going to use it for Melty Blood tournaments.
Sure.
Because it's just perfect. It's just perfect. It's like, man, Melty Blood in the bathroom remains a viable strat.
You don't have to sacrifice performance for it, or like be on like a shitty laptop screen, So let's go. But
It's all coming full circle, I guess.
I know. So
I will never
this is,
understand you FGC types and your bathroom melty bloods.
it's okay. The an FGC dude somehow pulled out a victory against a VTuber in chess yesterday. So the weirder things have happened this week. But this is such an interesting device because, like Chow said earlier, this concept is not new, but because it's affordable and it's just officially supported by one of the biggest companies in this space. Like, I really hope this thing takes off, and I think Valve is taking the right approach, even though it's slower. It's being more meticulous about, okay, how is this going to be received? And obviously, at least for the existing user base on Steam, it's already a hit success with their users, because when I look at my activity list and I see many others who take screenshots of their activity list and all their friends are just they scroll down, everyone's got a fucking pre-order on this thing. Everyone's got a reservation ticket on this thing because everyone's curious, because there's such a really weird sort of breakthrough moment potentially, and that's exciting.
But you can see how there's like been a through line for Valve for the last decade now about trying to unshackle PC gaming from the Office desk, where obviously they had big picture mode. Obviously, they are trying to implement like the Steam controller for games that usually weren't conducive for controller input. The Steam Link, you could argue, is people trying to get access to their PC games on another display device like a TV, and now the Steam boxes, and now
the
Steam machines.
Machine. That was the word that was escaping me. And now this. So I do see like there is a kind of a driven goal here to try to say like PC gaming doesn't have to be you at your desk with a monitor and keyboard.
Yeah.
Or with
I
mouse and
think
keyboard.
even more than that, this is a potential inflection point, because if their claims are really lofty claims of trying to get all the games on Steam working on Steam OS by the launch of this thing come to fruition, suddenly, like, people have been talking about how Proton's in a great state for a while now. But obviously, people aren't just going to install Linux to find out if they're already perfectly fine with their Windows machine. But if this comes out, and then you suddenly have a flood of people trying their games on SteamOS and being like, yeah, all my games do work on Linux, what does that say for the future of PC gaming? Because I know from my standpoint, it's like the only thing keeping me on Windows specifically were two things. One, being able to play all my games without any issues. Two, being able to do stuff like video editing on Linux. My video editing software is on Linux. I might go back to Linux if, like, when this thing comes out, like, and I test my games again, all of them just work under Linux. Because for a lot of people, they've outright said, well, if I could run all of my games seamlessly without any hassle on Linux, I would switch. And I think that more so than unshackling the PC gaming experience from a desktop or a laptop, just as importantly, this is for Valve a good opportunity to say, hey, we've been working on this for the last several years. Here's all the fruits of our labor. When we say that you can play games on Linux now without any issues, the proof is in the pudding. Go wild.
The funny thing about this too is this is all coming off of this news of it supporting Windows. If you want to reinstall Windows on this or not, we're just mere weeks away from that previous announcement of, like, when Windows 11 was shown off, and then they said, hey, this natively supports Android apps from the Amazon App Store, but you can sideload apps, so you can potentially install Windows 11 on this thing and then play Android games on this device too, and just having a bigger display and like a better screen, a bigger space to interact with Android mobile games. And that's just a weird thing to think about. It's like, okay, like, if you don't want to deal with BlueStacks and you don't trust the weird shady nature of it to some extent, maybe this will be a path for mobile gamers as well to interact with this device and use this device in that realm too.
I'm interested. And I think, like, I don't have a pre-order for this yet. I'll wait to see like how initial impressions are, and then maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring. But I'm interested to see like some of the more technically or capably minded of us figuring out like what they can do that we haven't thought of yet. Like if they combine a certain service and a certain back end, and they do something like you can do this on your Steam Deck, and I'm interested to see like what sort of passion projects come out of this.
Yeah, and this is only the initial batch of this is only available to like North America, Europe, and I think one other territory. I'm forgetting
The UK.
UK. And then so they still have this has yet to roll out to other territories, but let's say this comes out to Japan. I wonder how well it would take off there once it gets there, and I wonder if it'll find a market there that's significant. It'd be great if it goes there and it becomes so big that more and more Japanese developers are incentivized to release their games on Steam because of this device, because the Japanese market is so enticed by handheld devices and handheld gaming.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I want to say is that for me specifically, this is exciting because my very first gaming PC had a similar kind of spec to this. Had an HD 7850, an i5 3570K, and 16 gigs of RAM. And as far as I can tell, the CPU is comparable, maybe a little bit stronger. The GPU is probably 20% faster. And the resolution I ran that PC on was 1366 by 768. So basically every game that I've ran at 60 FPS on that old system should have no issues running on here. And it's not like for something like this at 720p and with a 7-inch screen, you're gonna want to run it at max settings because I'm a snob. I have a 4K gaming PC. I can tell you right now, the vast majority of people on that tiny, low-resolution screen will not be able to tell the difference between medium and high settings in the vast majority of games.
Yeah, because you just get your real estate, your DPI is what you end up having to compare there. And when your real estate is that limited, it ends up being less impactful. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this ends up taking off. It seems pretty promising based on what we've seen with, it's hard to extrapolate from what our Steam activity list looks like, but there's a lot of potential here. I think we at least all see that. Whether it'll live up to that remains to be seen, but it's really cool, really enticing, lots of possibilities here. And now, the reason why you all listen to this podcast is because we are, in some ways, a variety show, and you never know what to expect from us. And I'm using that to try to bring Adam into the fold, who has been a bit quiet in this first section. I guess he's not that excited about Steam Deck, because he's been doing something way on the other side of things. Adam, you've been playing a game that I had a bunch of interest in, but I never really expected to see anyone play this, but you went on and completed it in the last week. Tell me about Ys 4, Dawn of Ys.
All right. So
sorry that I feel like it's such an abrupt segue, but it's I don't know.
I don't know if there's any other way you could segue this.
Thank you, Adam, for giving me this ammunition.
Yeah, so
real canon Ys 4.
So I mentioned in the podcast last week that I played Final Fantasy 1 and 2, kind of just on a whim, just what, I want to play these versions. And I was just kind of looking for something to do. I had finished Ys 9 on PC. I'm waiting for The World Ends With You. I know there's Monster Hunter Stories, but I just haven't really gotten into Monster Hunter yet. So I was just kind of thinking what should I play? What should I do? And I have my PS3 hooked up, right? Yes, my PS3. I had recently hooked it up to go through PlayStation Network and download a bunch of games back when we had that PSN scare.
Yeah.
These are no longer going to be available. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but on the Japanese PlayStation Store, they do have a handful of PC Engine titles, and I don't have a PC Engine or TurboGrafx or whatever it's called over here.
Good question.
And it's just anyways, I was I didn't realize they had PC Engine games, right? And I noticed that they have a couple of games that I'm interested in available. They have the one I was interested in was Ys 4 Dawn of Ys. Now, this is a PC Engine game made in 1993. It's the fourth game in the Ys series. And if you're not familiar with this, so this Ys series is Falcom's, their flagship RPG series.
Is it?
But they're
flagship
long-standing
action
one,
RPG.
right? Yeah, but when Ys 4 came out, Falcom actually didn't develop it, and they released two different versions of Ys 4 a month apart in 1993. One was made by Hudson Soft, and I actually don't remember who made Mask of the Sun, but they released two different versions of the game, which is a little bit odd. So this is the Hudson Soft developed PC Engine version of Ys 4. And this version, it feels like a direct sequel in a way to Ys Book 1 and 2, which is the PC Engine version of Ys 1 and 2, which makes sense. Same platform and all that. So this is back in the day when the Ys series was the bump system. Y'all remember the bump system?
Hell yeah, the superior system.
Yep.
So, so if you've played Ys Chronicles on PC or if you played Ys Book, you know that like these sorts of games, it's like a pixel art, top-down, little sprite-based game, and you play the game by controlling Adol, the red-haired swordsman adventurer, and you effectively just bump into the enemies, and you have to like be a little kind of cautious in terms of like what angle you bump them at in order to do damage and whatnot. So it's a pretty simple game conceptually in terms of figuring out like how to play it, what you are doing, but it's still really fun. And the thing with PC Engine games is that they look great and it sounds great too. So that's really what this version of Ys 4 has going for it, is that PC Engine art style with like the anime-esque character portraits, the sprite style and the rest of the game. The music is great, great sound chip. It's a pretty simple game. It's also only about like 10 hours long. I think I was like 11 hours or so. I was playing it in Japanese. Now, I don't really know Japanese other than yes and no.
And you know what's also funny? This game is the only game that I remember where Adol actually starts with his equipment from Ys 2, and he doesn't lose it from a shipwreck.
Well, he still loses it.
He still loses it, but he didn't lose it from a shipwreck.
Yeah. But I was just following a guide online that basically gives you a very broad overview of what's going on and where to go. Like, I didn't need to know every line of dialogue. Like, oh, here's Gruda. Here he's just talking some shit. Who cares?
These stories used to be simple.
Yeah, but it's a fun game. It's very simple. So unlike Memories of Celceta, which is the remake that came out in like 2013, right? And that's the now canon version of Ys 4. But it was fun kind of seeing that story from a different, like, it's kind of like an altered, now non-canon version of it. Well, and seeing like the different character designs of like characters like Karna and Durin, which I know kind of backwards from Memories of Celceta, the remake, like, oh, here's what they look like in this version, right? So, but it's like a fun, simple game. I'm glad I played it. It's got that old Ys style where you explore these little dungeons, you find new towns, you get upgrades to your equipment, you get a few magic spells. Most bosses in the game, it's mostly pattern recognition in terms of you might fight like an ice spider, and the ice spider boss kind of throws these icicles around, and you have to dodge them, and you have to know how to move all around to hit into the boss and avoid the icicles and whatnot. So it's a pretty simple game. It's not very complex for me to describe like how you play it, but it's nice that if you want. Like, if this is the sort of thing that interests you, you can go onto a PS3, go to PSN, and just download it and buy it. And you like
just have a PS3, working PS3.
Yeah.
PS3 guys. There is an English patch for it for the people that's in the emulation scene there. I was gonna say, like, Falcom actually said this isn't even canon when it came out originally. They said the Mass of the Sun is the canon version back then.
I think that one was supposed to be more what they were planning for Ys 4 at the time. So Dawn of Ys, I guess, was never canon, but it is interesting to see. Game.
Superior story, in my opinion, and that's why I treat it as a canon version back then in my head canon, right? Because I just feel like the scope of this game, it's way bigger than Mask of the Sun, and everything is just better in it.
So I haven't played Mask of the Sun. I'm interested in playing it.
Yeah, now it's on your list.
It's one of those things where it seems like the conventional wisdom is that Mask of the Sun isn't very good. Like, just from my vantage point, just what I gather, that seems to be the case. But I do know a handful of people who swear by it. It maybe doesn't look as good as a PC Engine game or doesn't sound as good or whatever. But I know some people who say, actually, this one is pretty good. So I'm interested to see it for myself eventually. But
now that you mentioned it earlier about just how in the PS3 era, just the PSN store was just, especially the Japanese PlayStation store was so wide open with what developers and publishers submitted into that store, especially like retro legacy titles. Like I just wish that that catalog went forward with PS4 and PS5. Like I just it's still one of the biggest bummers because that Japanese PlayStation store with all its older titles is just such a treasure trove, and I wish there was some way to just move that catalog forward and have it all work in modern systems.
I feel the same way about like the Wii Virtual Console.
Yes.
That's actually the reason why I still have my Wii U and my PlayStation 3 is I have like hundreds of digital games on those like classic catalog titles from Nintendo on the Wii U's case or a bunch of developers in the PlayStation 3's case. And I know most of those titles, if I wanted, I could emulate or whatever, but it's just kind of nice that they're all like right there and I can playable on these machines. And it'd be, like you said, if those could transfer those licenses to like PS4 and PS5, that'd be fantastic. But I feel like, sadly, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur yelling at a meteor here, where most people, I guess, just aren't that interested in like retro catalog titles, which is why in recent years you get more like the subscription services for Nintendo Switch Online, or it doesn't seem to be as much of a thing nowadays, but those nostalgia legacy consoles like the SNES
The
Mini
minis,
and even a PC Engine Mini and all that. So little collectors consoles. But I think it's really cool that on PS3 you can like buy hundreds of games that are classic RPGs, and unfortunately they're just stuck to the PS3. So
well, I remember you talking about like if you wanted to go into like the Suikoden series, it's weird how it feels like you can just say, well, you can play most of them on PSN, on PS3, and it's just like, well, that's convenient, except for the PS3 part. It's like,
well, you can also play it on Vita. I mean, if you download it on the Vita.
Well, here's the thing with Suikoden: if you want to play Suikoden, like let's just say you want to play that series, Suikodens 1 through 4, unfortunately not 5, are available digitally on PS3, and you can play them all. So it'd be nice if you could do that on a PS4 or PS5, but you can't. So sucks.
You know what you can do soon? You can get Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles on Steam and play it on your Steam Deck.
There you go.
So what do you like better? Dawn of Ys or Memories of Celceta?
Celceta, I think, is fine. It's not one of my favorite East games. It was kind of the first one with that map completion meta game, or whatever you want to call it. And I think it goes a little bit overboard there, where you end up like scraping the borders of the zones and whatnot.
I remember that.
And it's not a great looking game. It's got some. I'm not a huge fan of the art style, and even though it is a Vita game, it's not a very good looking Vita game. It looks like maybe it was developed on PSP, and it's just it's okay. It's just okay.
I feel like that one was like they're still trying to fine tune the party system, which wasn't really got its footing yet.
And also the characters in the party in that game weren't just like. Do you remember the spear guy's name? I don't remember the spear guy's name.
I think his name started with an A, maybe.
That was my first Ys game, actually. And I was
gonna say, if you were playing the game in Japanese, it's the first time that Ado got a voice change, got a new voice actor for him, starting in that game.
But Ado's voice just shouts and grunts and stuff, right?
Yeah, but he actually has a new voice actor for him. He used to be voiced by the voice actor that did Trunks from the Dragon Ball series, and then later on they got Eren from Attack on Titan. Trying to remember his name.
Oh, that's interesting because in English,
English voice is the English Eren.
I actually don't. This is a complete aside, but I'm as someone who listens to dubs most of the time. This is really like passionate for me, who usually like tries to stay even keeled about this. I can't stand Pappenbrook's voice. I don't know. There's something about it. Like I'm playing Ys 9 in Japanese. It's Pappenbrook. Damn it. And then I was
though he's just grinding.
More on this later. One of the English voice actors. He is one of the English voice actors for Tales of Arise. One of the characters had an introductory trailer this week. I'm like, damn it, it's Pappenbrook again. Am I gonna have to play this in Japanese too?
You know what actually kind of bums me out about that? Like this is more like fundamentally, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word, but Papenbrook already voiced a Tails character. He was Asbel, and I kind of wish that like voice actors wouldn't reprise like in the series again. You know, just give me more variety.
Just kind of shows you how limited the talent pool. I'm always more interested in seeing.
I think the talent pool actually isn't that limited. It just people just need to branch out.
They just
more.
go. They just.
You
They
guys
just
should
go back to the
audition.
well.
You should be
They
Tails
just trying to be
protagonist.
safe with additions, I guess. That's probably why it's always the same group of people that you see doing these characters.
I want to play a Tails game with Brian Adams voices in it.
I could do a better job than Papenbrook, probably.
Oh,
Actually, I probably could. I don't know. There's really nothing that's like technically wrong with it. I just don't like it. He sounds like
Brian has
me
drawn the
trying
line.
to. He sounds like me trying to voice act or be edgy. Like he sounds like some like mid-20s something, even though I think he's like nearly 40. Just trying to like sound like a 19-year-old or a young 20-something. Like some people can pull it off, but he can't. Anyways, that's a big tangent. Sorry, and if you Papenbrook fans out there, I'm sorry.
Anyways, Ys 4 is pretty fun. It's pretty simple. I'm not going to say it's the most complex, like intricate game, but it's kind of a comfortable classic ride.
We did earmark a spot here in the first section of the podcast to go back and talk about a game that we discussed a bit last week that Josh had been playing, and that was the Somnium Files, not AI, as I mistakenly thought. So Josh had finished the game, and I wanted to just give him, obviously no spoilers, but I just wanted to give him a chance just to follow up and conclude kind of his thoughts that he introduced last week.
I barely just finished it like maybe an hour or so before this podcast started. I won't get too deep into it because obviously spoilers, and we have talked about it at length last week. But I just wanted to say I was surprised how much I really liked it. I think it's definitely one of the best Uchikoshi type games out there. When someone is asking me, it's like, how does it compare to like the Zero Escape series? And I think the DS version of 999 is still better overall to me, but I think this might possibly be better than Virtue's Last Reward in my head. I was just really surprised by the concepts that they introduced in it, and I was sort of starting to like piece together before they officially unveiled it how it would go, but the way they executed it and the through line through all of that was actually pretty like solidly told. Like it's but the thing with Uchikoshi games, especially late in the game, is that for me a lot of them fall apart because they somehow leave like really big open plot threads, or they just don't wrap up in a really tidy way that kind of makes all the most sense. Like even 999 doesn't have like it nails some of the landing, but in certain segments, like the upside down Sudoku, to those who know. But the overall like through line after that ending and the way that it ended, it's like, okay, that's weird, I guess.
Yeah, the end. Let me just butt in here real quick. I only played 999. I haven't played the others, and that ending kind of caught me off guard. Like, wait, they're just gonna leave this dangling. Like, what about that? Like, it's not even like it doesn't even feel like a sequel tease. It's just kind of like they never explained this. What does it mean?
Yeah,
it's weird.
I'm not going to say that Somnium Files is like completely flawless in that part. There are definitely bits around the edges that I was like, man, I wish they kind of went into this certain plot thread more to really clear it up. And I do wonder, like, I'd be very surprised if the sequel goes into that. But overall, it actually just nails the landing. Like after everything is said and done, it feels conclusive. It didn't need to have a sequel. I'm glad that it does, and I'm very excited for it now. But it adds conclusively without no sort of sequel tease. Like I'm sure that's why a lot of like AI Somnium Files fans were caught off guard with a sequel announcement. It's like, oh wow, this is getting followed up. That's weird because this first game ended so conclusively, and the way it went. I'm really interested to see what's the main conflict this time in this new one. But I can understand the passion now of why people really, really like this game. And to people who were thinking of giving it a shot before the sequel comes out, definitely do, and try your best not to get spoiled on it, because the less you know, the better, obviously. And it was very uplifting having, not only people in here, but other friends and other places like being very supportive of me as I went through this game, because they're kind of reliving it through me of like, wait, that's weird. What's going on? My mind is fucked. And that's it was a ride. It was a very cool roller coaster ride. I really enjoyed it. So if you're thinking about playing it, 2 thumbs up for me. Go for it.
I was gonna say, is it really heavy in the puzzle department, like the 999 series?
No, it's not too much like in the 999 style where you have to like solve really weird, obscure puzzles. Or it's more like an adventure, a level where you're in this space and you do have a time limit, but that time really only moves when you move. And as you're interacting with pieces in that puzzle to progress, there are certain like items you can use to lessen the amount of time it would take to like interact with those things. So let's say I have 180 seconds left to complete this puzzle, and I am interacting with this crane, for example. I have to do something with it. It'll give you like a list of like 3 to 4 choices possibly, and then each of those choices take time. Like, hey, if you hit the crane, it'll take 10 seconds. If you investigate the crane, it'll take 5. If you tackle it, it may take 50 seconds. Some of those interactions will give you an item back to lessen that time. So let's say you might have an item that'll take 1/3 of the time off. So if you use like 1/3 on that 50 second interaction, there's a way to use that thing without taking much time. So there's a way it marries its mechanics, time limit mechanics, with adventure game puzzles. So it's not as intensive as the 999 type of puzzle, but there is still some problem solving elements involved.
But between 999 and AI, or sorry,
I still the Nintendo DS version of 999 specifically is still I still could hold it a little bit better in higher regard, because that final puzzle in that version of the game is still one of my favorite moments in gaming. I guess it also is like it was so novel for its time when it came out too. It's like, oh, this is a weird escape room anime style puzzle game, and you didn't really know what to expect. So it's like it had that element of surprise. Even if I've already played like Uchikoshi games before that, like Ever 17, it was still pretty cool because of the way it utilized the DS hardware itself for its puzzle mechanics. That it never was able to really emulate in future re-releases of that game. So that's why I like it. But AI Somnium does a much better job in making the flow of the actual plot of the game. It flows much more naturally. It makes more sense of like how characters interact with you. It's not so far out there. It is still comical in its action sequences, but the characters are feel much more grounded and in some ways lovable.
in 999.
In AI Somnium
Oh,
compared
and
to
I,
999.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember playing 999 on the DS when it first came out. Like all my friends were like telling me, it's like this sleeper's hit that you never heard of. You gotta try it, buy it.
Yeah, 999
Yeah.
somehow like broke through. I don't know if it was the marketing or if it was just pure quality word of mouth, nothing more pure than that. Because like this is gonna sound more cynical than I mean, but like Adam played it. Like Adam saw something that made him want to try it. So
well,
I
actually,
100%.
can I?
Go ahead.
This isn't really that relevant, but the only reason why I played it, maybe not the only reason, but the primary reason why I played it is because someone gifted it to me, and then I kind of felt like at that point, oh no, I have to, right?
I don't know if you should be admitting that, but I like it.
So just buy a game for Adam and he'll play it. Easy. Okay, we'll remember that.
Buy him a Final Fantasy 14 subscription.
Uh-oh.
I thought he has one.
Does he?
No, I don't.
What were you gonna say, James?
I was just going to say that I feel like one of the things with 999 is that anyone that finished it on the original DS is just going to evangelize it because of that final sequence, really taking advantage of the hardware.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things in gaming. It's like, oh, I've never really seen this before. That's insane.
I hate to ask for spoilers, but did they just completely remove it for the remasters and the re-releases?
It's altered. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to emulate it. Yeah, it's hard to emulate it because it used the dual screens. Like it was intrinsic to that final sequence that there's no way you can really bring that sense of hardware involvement into other re-releases, especially when you're releasing on different kinds of hardware throughout the board. So you have to make a unified version of that puzzle.
So is it kind of similar to like the World Ends With You remix on the Switch?
Yeah, kinda.
Well, that covers us for our new shuffled intro section of games we've been playing, and I guess games we're anticipating playing when it comes to the Steam Deck. We don't really have much in the way of features on the site right now. We do have a nice slew of Monster Hunter Stories 2 guides. So both James and Colin have been working really hard on making sure that they try to answer any questions you might want to search for when playing through that game. On the news front, it's kind of an interesting flavor of news this week. It's a lot of kind of like speculation, anticipation sort of stuff, and a few announcements alongside, as always. This first one that we're going to open with is basically a smorgasbord of possible speculation. We could go way into detail on this. And that is because Atlus has opened up a 25th anniversary website for the Persona series. And that in itself is kind of like celebratory, and, you know, that's nice and cool and all that. But if you go to this website, and we'll have the link to this site for you, they specifically list out basically 7 teases of upcoming projects to be announced starting in September all the way into autumn of next year. It's just a bunch of big question marks saying coming soon for the Persona 25th anniversary project. I don't know, like, where in the world we want to start with this. Obviously, people have been joking. Here comes more dancing games. Here comes more spin-offs. Or maybe like a Persona 5 Royal anime. Oh yeah, fighting game. A Persona 5 fighting game hasn't existed yet. So
you joke, but there is a decent chance that at least one of those will be a Persona 5 Royal anime, because they did a separate anime for the golden content.
Yeah, I can see it. I feel like one of the 2 of these announcements are that Royal Persona 5 Royal anime adaptation, and one of them most certainly has to be a concert of some kind, because they always do that.
Yeah, and a lot of people want this to be Persona 6, or at least one of them to be Persona 6, and I think there is an actually good shot of that, because there's
I think
one picture that
the last one was.
Yeah, because people need to understand that Persona 5 was revealed in, was it early 2014 or something like that?
Yeah,
and that was like
the original winter release date, 2014, 2015. That didn't come true.
Yeah, but it's like, compared to like when Persona 4 came out and then when Persona 5 was revealed, this is around a similar time frame, and like they have that picture of all of the Persona protagonists, the one from Persona 1, the 2 from Persona 2, both the Persona 3 regular protagonist and Femc, Persona 4 protagonist, Persona 5 protagonist.
Those are from past Persona games? I thought they were just brand new characters they unveiled. That's weird.
So what there is that there's a merch page attached to this where you can get like masks, pouches, whatever, tons, pins, all the normal stuff, including a trading card set, which is what James was referring to. 8 trading cards with 7 previous protagonists on there, and an 8th secret. So that's kind of like, is this the big announcement that they're going to be leading up to into August of next year? I think the chances are like greater than a coin flip, I feel like.
It's going to validate all the shows the Persona 5 or 6 protagonist crowd from Persona 4 Arena. The red-haired guy. He's the next protagonist, right, bros?
I need context. Who's this red-haired arena guy?
So in Persona 4 Arena, there, I think in Ultimax he showed up. There's this guy named Sho Minazuki, I think his name was. He was a red-haired protagonist, but there was like leaked images of it, and no one knew it was like from a fighting game, I think, at that time. And then so people only saw this this character. He's like, oh, he has to be the new main character for Persona 5. It's gonna happen. Sho is the Persona 5 protagonist. They're leading up to him being the protagonist to Persona 5. When Persona 4 Arena Ultimax came out, it's like, you guys are fucking dumb. It's great.
If this wasn't a Japanese focused website, well, it is in English, but or is it in English? No, it's not.
The important thing about this is when the Japanese Twitter account started advertising this, the Atlus USA account also advertised this website alongside with them, with specifically the September announcement. So, like logic dictates whatever their first announcement is for September. You would assume it's for the global audience, and possibly all 7 of these may be for the global audience. Hopefully, because Atlus USA themselves is advertising this 25th anniversary website. So, maybe that's being optimistic. Who knows? Because we've been. This isn't like it'd be a weird trend to start now.
Right.
Maybe
Well,
it will, because
the two things I was thinking of
global release so simultaneously. So who knows?
The two things I was thinking of were more PC ports. Then I thought, like, if it's a Japanese focused announcement, would that really be something they'd highlight? But maybe if it is have enough of a global reach, we'll see like Royal on PC, or can we hope older catalog titles on PC? Or just when talking about catalog titles, obviously the joke is like, who are these protagonists from these games before Persona 3 that they highlighted the key art? But having a more modern, convenient way to play those titles, having those brought forward would be really awesome. Especially like, so I have played Persona 4 Golden, and it's really weird because I loved it, but I haven't really followed up on the series for no real good reason other than commitment of like time. Just haven't really found a space to squeeze it in. But like, if I knew that I had, whether it was Switch or Steam or Steam Deck, if I had like, you now have access to the Persona catalog, or we're bringing forward Persona 1 and 2 as a pack or a trio. Would that be a dual pack or a trio pack?
It'll be a trio pack.
Yeah, on a modern convenient platform. If the hurdle was lowered, I think that would just be like smart for the series going forward, even though I know most people are excited at the prospect of Persona 6, of course. But if that exists, it's obviously going to be the last one in August. So we got 6 blanks before then that we have to try to fill in. So what do we think? Maybe like anime announcement, fighting game announcement, PC announcement, port announcement. What am I up to? 4?
I think one of them is going to be like a mobile gacha style game.
All right, okay. That's
Not
fine.
only are those just popular, but I also think Sega, in general, like one of their best performing games recently, like that's like bringing in tons and tons of money, is the Hatsune Miku mobile game. Plus, they have a few others, and I just feel like Sega has been pushing that a little bit, and I feel like Persona is this type of series. There's plenty of characters now that would probably suit one. So
the light works. Gotcha.
Insane. That'd be hilarious, but insane. Yeah, I wonder, because the Shin Megami Tensei mobile game, the DX2, has been running for years now, and that's been steady from what I understand. Not like it's not the thing that sets the world on fire, but it's a steady income for them. So that makes sense. I can see it.
So the first of these announcements is in September, I believe. Did I say that? Yeah, September. So a little over a month away.
If they're going to reintroduce Persona 3, do you think it's going to be a remake or some sort of port?
A port. They don't really have the resources to do a whole remake. That's just my opinion.
If they do a remake, I wonder who's developing it, is basically what I'm getting at. So.
I was gonna say, I wonder if they would like scrap the calendar system for Persona 6 or just keep it. I feel like it's not fresh anymore, right? So, will they keep going with it or just throw it away?
This new, like, Hashino is off of for the next entry for Persona, as far as we know, because he's busy with Project Re-Fantasy, whatever that ends up being. So we're walking in with the assumption in Persona 6 that I'll be junior members helming it, which is potentially exciting. So if they're the ones helming it, hopefully they're thinking of like a refresh of the format and thinking about just shaking up the formula that we've seen in 3, 4, and 5. So I'd be fine with the calendar system being gone. I'd actually welcome it, and I'm up for new ideas and doing something totally different with the next Persona entry, whatever it may be.
I do feel like in a way Persona 5 is sort of in terms of the system that they've had in place for the last few Persona games, Persona 5 basically is bringing that to its fullest potential. And I'm not sure if there's really much more you can go there without just a few changes. You don't have to like change it up, like make it an action RPG or something, even though they kind of already did that with Strikers. But just it'd be nice to see a few tweaks here and there, just to see some new ideas, some fresh mechanics, and we'll see.
What if those blank spots for the next protagonist or the next entries in the series in terms of merch. What if they're intentionally because these aren't all the Persona protagonists that have ever appeared in the series. Everyone always forgets Persona Trinity Soul. So maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to reintroduce the real forgotten thing that Atlus tries to do. Yeah, it's the anime that came out after Persona 3.
Yeah, it has Akihiko in there.
Yep, it has a grown-up Akihiko in there.
Wait, it's canon.
It's definitely not canon anymore. But, for a long time it sort of was, and then Atlus definitely distanced themselves very fast once people are like, this isn't what we want. I'm like, fuck you guys, Trinity Soul is the shit.
I think people were just upset that they couldn't use their personas in that anime. I think
they did eventually, but it was one of the sticking things in the anime that was interesting. Was for a long good chunk of it, the personas were kind of locked. It was actually not bad, but people give you shit for that. Trinity Soul wasn't that bad, okay, guys? Get over it. Rewatch it. I swear to God.
If they announce something with it, I will watch it. I am that confident that they will not show anything related to this game.
I will. No, that's right. It'll be my redemption arc. Once they utter the word Trinity Soul this anniversary thing, I'm like, that'll be one of the announcements. One of the announcements will be a Blu-ray release for Persona Trinity Soul.
Yes,
you heard it here. Inside scoop.
Here's another kind of speculative announcement, which really is not that much to go on, but people have been kind of running wild with it. And we're talking about the Final Fantasy series here. In an interview in Famitsu magazine and then reported on in Japanese blogs, there was an interview with Tetsuya Nomura about Final Fantasy X and the possibility of a Final Fantasy X-3. So this is something that has been like speculated ever since the release of like the remaster, which kind of conveniently packaged the Final Fantasy Will audio drama sequel, and then also ties in the Final Fantasy X-2.5 novel follow-up. And then in this interview in Famitsu, he basically says that the Final Fantasy X-3 has a synopsis written by writer Nojima, but it's not actively in development right now, but the possibility of it existing is not 0%. Obviously, people who enter the game industry after playing Final Fantasy VII, and that's why they followed up with a bunch of the, the compilation of that series, and now obviously the remake ongoing for that. So now is it time to revisit Final Fantasy X? Basically, they're refusing to shut the door on it. The possibility is still there.
Yeah, let's be clear here about who said what, because the possibility isn't zero is by Matomu Toriyama, who said that. So they still want to finish production on FF7 remake first. Kazushige Nojima was the one who said, he's had the opportunity to work with people in the industry who, they went into the games industry after playing FF7, but now he's at that phase where he's working with the people who got into the game industry after FF10. So they're kind of reflecting back on it and thinking about, they're not going to completely shut it off. There's always a possibility. And Nomura is just saying, I have more or less a rough idea, and I've written down some stuff for a possible follow-up to 10-2, and as you said, they had the novel, they had the audio drama. And I guess the real question is, people who were fans of FF10, a good chunk of them already have done the research of like what would a follow-up look like, and all I'm saying is if there's no exploding blitzballs, I'm not interested.
Yeah, so first of all, and speaking generically, not specific to Final Fantasy, I think developers and producers smartly do this general attitude of never say never. They don't want to box themselves in with any sort of absolute, yes, it will happen, no, it won't happen, because then they don't want to go back on that. But then I feel like a lot of times people run with it, give an inch, take a mile, and it becomes a promise. Or they like anticipate it as like, oh, it's happening, when I think they just don't want to box themselves out. They want to keep that door open. And you see this sort of thing, I think, all the time, where they just don't want, it seems like the audience wants an absolute when they're not going to get it. And then so when they say this, like, oh, it might happen, sure, in the future, we haven't started on it, not really. We have some general ideas if we ever go that route. And then people say, like, immediately whether they do or don't want it. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes you have to be careful about what exactly is being promised.
You oftentimes see headlines like, producer would like to do this. And it's like, yeah, I would like to do this if someone greenlit a project and gave me money and kept me employed to make this thing. Like, sure, I would like to do that. And yeah, they're not going to say nope, it'll never happen, never ever, not in the next 100 years, and like they're not going to do that.
So I played Final Fantasy X was my first Final Fantasy game, and I revisited it last year or the year before to see how it held up, and I still liked it, though I can view it with a more less naive critical mind now. I think the idea of Final Fantasy X-3, I just don't know like what they could do with it that isn't really surface level fan service, and I'm using just like fan pleasing sort of thing more than anything. So I haven't read 2.5, but I have listened to the audio drama, and there's just nothing about it that just seems like it's that compelling. It's like first, I don't want to like spoil it, but I feel like there's nothing like
the audio drama
worth spoiling.
It's kind of like, what if the thing about the audio drama is basically like, what if Sin came back again? And it's like, you're going back to that well? Like, really? Come on.
Well, whenever I hear something about a potential sequel or something that's set 100 years later, one thing that I always see when people speculate is like, is this so-and-so's descendant or so-and-so's granddaughter? Like you see that, like you see this with like Star Wars, you see this with other properties, where people just want to be served like, remember this character that you learned in this game or this franchise, and this is their descendant. And that just, to me, just makes the world feel like really small. Like you look at like Boruto, and it's just like, here's everyone from the original cast's kid, and they're just like visually similar, only slightly different sort of thing. And it just makes, and then like in this audio drama, I guess we're going to do light spoilers. They suggest that like Auron has a daughter. Like, why not? Because that's cool, right? People latch onto that. And it just seems like this isn't compelling. So Final Fantasy X
you would rather have like potentially 100 years later, same world, same history, but like new character in this world.
Or even like 10 years later, like here's someone who it wasn't their role to take a major place in the events that had happened. But now, due to the circumstance of the narrative they're crafting, here's their chance to become involved in the story. Someone who was just on the sidelines before.
It's not Titus's son, it's Titus's nephew. Now are you on board?
Let's go a few steps further than that. So, but like Final Fantasy X had this like really big through line of like grief and loss and how we push past it and the way people, cope with it. And then Final Fantasy X-2, despite not agreeing with every direction they took, it was like what you do once you're unshackled by like the expectations that had been placed upon you unfairly, and like you've got a new sense of freedom. Where do you go with that? How do we direct that to and then like Final Fantasy X-3, the idea of it, maybe they could pull it out of their hat again and kind of come up with something compelling. But based on what I know of the sequel novel and the Will audio drama, if that is going to be the springboard at which they launch into a sequel series or an entry in this now series potentially, it just doesn't interest me.
What's the most realistic thing that'll happen is they'll have a Final Fantasy X-3, but they'll call it Final Fantasy X Remake.
Or they'll call it like Sin Returns Final Fantasy X or something like that. But just that.
All right, I'm on board now.
Just that conceit itself, like, we were going to just return this other antagonist because people like that, right? So we'll just bring it back and that just invalidates what happened in the first game a little bit. And of course, we're like extrapolating to an insane degree here because we have to.
Doesn't 10-2 does that to the first game, in my opinion? I mean,
it does in some ways. Because 10 is a lot about like sometimes loss is unavoidable or it's sad and it's regrettable, but you have to move past it. You have to find the strength to hold that with you and carry it forward. And then 10-2 is a little bit more like, what if you didn't have to do that? What if you could have it back, sort of thing. And then 10-3 is like, okay, so now you've already seen both sides of that theming. What do you do with 10-3? Well, you just pretend Auron had a daughter and Titus is back and Sin is back or whatever. And it's just like
a school RPG. Woo!
Yeah, let's put a calendar system there. I don't know. So obviously the chances of this really happening, like if let's say they decided right now to break digital ground on a 10-3, we wouldn't see it for 6 years at the earliest. So it's kind of like one of those things where
they said they were going to do it after they finished the remake of Final Fantasy VII series. So that's going to be like decades.
After the heat death of the universe, that we can expect this.
But yeah, practically speaking, even if this was the very next project after Final Fantasy VII Remake, assuming 7 Remake is like 3 games or whatever, even if it's just 2 games, it's like, oh, so this game is like 6, 7, 8 years away. I hope I'm like alive and healthy by then. So
revisit us on episode 900 of the Tetracast when we talk about
Yeah, for
Final
the
Fantasy
full
X3.
FX3 impressions.
We're preempting a spoiler cast for this 10.3
Yeah.
years in advance. Here we go.
Get hype.
I'm not excited about it yet.
It has to exist first before I can
Yeah,
really
that's
start
true.
thinking about it.
I mean, we waited nearly 10 years for Final Fantasy 15. Surely we could wait another 10 for 10 free.
Here we go. All right, you brought this up earlier when talking about Steam Deck. I keep wanting to say Stream Deck. Steam Deck. You brought up Super Robot Wars. And did we talk about Super Robot Wars 30, about having its South Asian English release last week? I forget.
No, it didn't have its event yet. The only thing about Super Robot Wars 30 that we knew last week was it was announced on a Nintendo Direct stream in Japan.
In Japan, yes. So a truncated series of events is that we did learn it would have a South Asian English release. Then we saw that based on the Steam database, it might actually show up on Western storefronts or available to download in Western markets. Finally, it got a trailer uploaded to the Bandai Namco, I believe, EU page, advertising the English release, but without any press release or any like social call or any marketing. Just the trailer just appeared out of nowhere. And then finally, Bandai Namco did finally formally announce it that Super Robot Wars 30 will release on October 28th worldwide, at least on PC. So I will hand it over to resident Super Robot Wars expert, Joshua Torres.
This was really, really exciting. So I guess the easiest way to explain this whole thing is chronologically. So they had a live stream of the Super Robot Wars event that happened last weekend after our last podcast. And they were basically unveiling the game in full, the whole series list. The whole series list, just to go through it really fast, is you have the Code Geass movie, the third movie, because they had these recap movies after the TV series. So they have the third movie of that, and then Resurrection, which is the sequel film, the new sequel film for there. They have Get a Robo Armageddon, Get X Swords coming back from T. Elgheim is an old Tomino show. Magic Knight Ray Earth is also coming back which made its series debut in T. One of the things that I really liked seeing was a little show called Majestic Prince. Is making its first. It's gonna be its first time. It's gonna be on a mainline console Super Robot Wars series. It's a really cool mech show that aired back in 2013. Then you have Mazinger Z Infinity, and then you have a whole list of Gundam shows. Like this is really cool. The very first Mobile Suit Gundam is gonna appear in this new entry. So the Gundam from Gundam 0079, you have Amuro with that iconic original Gundam still rocking it there. Then you have Mobile Suit Gundam shows Counterattack.
To cut in here, I just presumed that the original Gundam was just kind of like guaranteed to be in any of these. I just assumed he was
no. He always gets his Char's Counterattack counterpart when he's like old and more experienced.
Yeah, so that's why it's a cool thing, because like the original Gundam doesn't really appear in modern SRW games anymore. But since Super Robot Wars 30 is the anniversary title, 30 is for the 30th anniversary of the series. It's not the 30th Super Robot Wars game. So just one guess. How many SRW games do you think there's been with all the spin-offs included? Just a random number. Give me one.
16?
21.
21?
I've already seen the tweet on this. So.
Super Robot Wars 30 is the 69th Super Robot Wars game.
There's 69 games?
Nice.
Yes. Are they doing like funny counting here, where they like count like something a bunch of different ways when it's the same game repackaged?
No, I mean there are some releases, like maybe 5 or 6 releases.
You can maybe knock off a couple there.
Yeah, maybe, but for a good chunk of it, it's all standalone entries, like just new games, and this is the 69th one of those. Ever since its debut, since 1991.
So what is like the history in terms of? So I've always treated this series as like, so Josh and then site contributor Kite Steinbuck are the two big Super Robot Wars fans that I come into contact with, and these, if you want to play these games in English, usually you refer to importing the South Asian release that has an English option for text. What is the history of this game releasing formally in the West? Is the 30th, is Super Robot Wars 30 just the first in a while, or the first ever, or like what's the history there?
I'll get into that. Yeah, I'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to top it off, Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative was the sequel film to Gundam Unicorn that a lot of the Western audience is familiar with. The interesting thing about this inclusion is they're only including Gundam Narrative, not Unicorn. So that's an interesting move that they're doing. The mainstay Shark's Counterattack has been in a lot of recent Super Robot Wars entries. Zeta Gundam, also quite common. One that we haven't seen in a while is Victory Gundam. So that's randomly in here, and that's exciting. Victory Gundam is a really, really cool show.
It's basically the end of the UC universe, and it's basically the mech was supposed to be at its peak until like Gundam Unicorn came out.
It was peak depression Tomino show. It's a very depressing show. Combattler 5, which is interesting. It's only Combattler 5. It's not with Voltus 5. They're usually bundled together. Gal Gaigar Final is in here, but the mechs only. And then one of the most interesting inclusions in this one is the Gaigar Final versus Better Man, because that only exists as a novel only series, and Super Robot Wars only really targets, for the most part, anime or series that have had an anime adaptation. So that's an interesting one to adapt for this game. And then you have the mobile suit variations, and you have there are branches of Gundam where you mix up those mechs, especially for the Gunpla market, and then they refer to those as mobile suit variations and whatnot. New to this game, they're making their series debut for the first time in Super Robot Wars. I mentioned Gal Gaigar Final versus Better Man, but then you have J Decker. It's an old series. Then some of the newer ones is Knights and Magic, which is
light novel series.
Yeah, it's a light novel series, an Isekai, Another World series that got an anime adaptation a few years back.
Is this the first time that we got a light novel like selection into the game?
I don't think so. Then the one that a lot of Western fans are really happy about is that SSS Gridman makes its debut. It barely aired like in 2018, 2019.
Yeah, that's very recent.
It's very recent. So that was a big surprise for a lot of the audience making its debut here. It's gonna be the second Studio Trigger show that makes its debut, because Little Witch Academia was actually in one of the mobile SRW games. In Cross Omega, I think it's either shut down or about to shut down.
So as someone who doesn't watch any of these but knows, I'm aware of like Little Witch Academia fits in a Super Robot Wars game.
I forgot there wasn't a mech in the show, but like as part of her promotion, I think Obari, a very popular designer, like designed like a mech for it, like for some cover somewhere, and that was enough to be included in that mobile game. I think that's how it went. It's a really weird inclusion. I forget the specifics on the context of why it made it in, but yes, it was in there for a collaboration event. So yes.
All right, I found a YouTube video, Super Robot Wars X Omega or Cross Omega, yes. Grand Charian, Little Witch Academia. Like, all right, you're right.
Yeah,
I shouldn't have doubted it.
I mean, they can summon a giant robot, so that's good enough to fit in, right?
There you go.
I mean, yeah, that same mobile game before it shut down also had a collab event with Zombieland Saga, so anything's on the table for that mobile game. In that trailer, after announcing the full series list, which is a pretty damn solid series list, in my opinion, they announced the original cast for, because there's like an original male protagonist and female protagonist and mecha. And this is an interesting one because the original mecha for this game is the Huckabine 30, and the Huckabine is a very big legacy of inclusion for this game, because it's one of the original mechs from that spurred on throughout the earliest SRW entries, where it looks like a Gundam, but So, but it escapes that like Gundam license because they made enough tweaks to it and called it, hey, this is a Huckabine. It's not a Gundam, okay? So it looks super gaudy in this version because it has like the beat up skeleton model of the Huckabine from the second Super Robot Wars OG that was only released in Japan for the PS3. But that had like a cape and some bandages and some stuff. And this one has like a similar look to that, but to celebrate it, since it's the 30th anniversary, it has like a gold gaudy visor over its face, and it says XXX over it too. And for 30, not for the other thing that we're accustomed to for it.
I was gonna say, it's like, isn't like Presto is owned by Bandai now? It's like, do they even have to worry about the license anymore? That's looking too similar to Gundam.
There was actually I think mid-aughts debacle, or maybe no, it wasn't mid-aughts. It was like around early 2010, 2015. There was a weird restrictive hold on the Gundam likeness, which is why in second Super Robot Wars OG, like a plot point of that game was one of the antagonists like wiped out nearly all the Huckabines in that game because they were trying to like skirt around like, how do we get the Gundam likeness out of this original generation series that we're crafting, but we have to make it make sense. So that's why like that was like a plot point in that game. So now Bandai is more loose with it, so it's okay now. But there's this weird time period in SRW history where they had to like somehow step away from Gundam likenesses for their own original universe that they were crafting and whatnot. And then they shut off like the antagonist mech and the antagonist character. And one of they've released the first slew of gameplay details for this title. This title actually has a different progression from the previous titles that most Western players are accustomed to. A lot of the recent SRW entries, a lot of like even beyond what was localized, they were very linear. Hey, you pick a character and you go through story stages. There's no like grindable stages really, and it's a very linear story where you go like kind of like down a straight line of stages to the end. There will be some secrets here and there's some branching paths if you meet prerequisites, but you're always moving forward. In this one, it takes the form of what are the titles? Super Robot Wars Compact and Super Robot Wars MX for the PSP was the last time we saw this sort of non-linear progression where you have this like screen of like the globe, and you pick different regions on it, and then in each region there are like there'll be mission select screens, and you can tackle the story in whatever order you want in those stage selections. And I assume you go through those stages and then unlock a new set of areas with stages in it. So it's up to you to really dictate in what order do you want mechs to join you in as you move through the story forward. And that's really exciting because you may want your favorites earlier than other series, so there's an avenue to get like the mechs that you want early to your party and get them buff instead of having to like have the story dictated for you strictly. So they're going back to a non-linear story structure for that, which is cool. They're also introducing auto battle for the first time in the mainline console SRW. Auto battle was in Super Robot Wars DD, which is their ongoing mobile game, but they're having that system come into this game. And then for this game, there will be some stages you can actually replay and grind for like money and experience points. So having auto battle there will be for people like, hey, you want to get your mechs buff, you can like grind out resources for them and get them there. So I wonder if the structure of the difficulty of this game will accommodate for that. So recent Super Robot Wars games never really been that difficult. So I wonder if they'll make tweaks to that to accommodate for this change. So that's what they've announced for like the purely like series and gameplay portion of this game so far. As always with the previous releases of SRW, they have a special edition called the Premium Sound Edition, where they have a selection of tracks. In this one, like like over 30 sound selections of licensed anime content, whether it be like anime openings, like the original Gundam theme is in there, like with vocals and everything. The original songs are just there prepackaged and cut for, when you're into battle scenes. They're like perfectly cut for that. The interesting thing about this type is usually that premium sound edition was only exclusive to the Japanese physical releases of SRW. This time they're offered as DLC, so you can pick up a physical copy of this game if you so desire, like if you're getting it from Southeast Asia, and just download the premium sound edition as DLC instead of having to be confined to the Japanese release of this game. So that's pretty cool.
And like the Steam Deluxe, or sorry, there's a digital deluxe edition on Steam and an Ultimate edition. This is for like the global release, and the Ultimate edition does include the premium sound and data pack.
So just insane. That's actually
I don't know what the full franchise IP strings had to be pulled and twisted along behind the scenes to allow for this, but it seems like they were able to make it happen, which is crazy.
Yeah. Man, it still shocks me, to be honest.
Because that was always kind of like nebulously the reason like why these couldn't release in the West, was because you just figure that the copyrights and the IP holders was just way too like much of a minefield to navigate. But I mean, they're making it work at least this time around. So
yeah,
exciting stuff.
One of the new things that Super Robot Wars 30 is going to have is they're actually going to include. They've always had, past releases had DLC like as mission packs, so there are additional missions that happen like during the intermission between story stages, so they get like unlocked as the story goes along, or where it makes sense, and they're kind of like gag scenarios and having like fun basically in these scenarios, joke scenarios most of the time, filled with interesting character interactions from the multiple series they included. So they still have that, but they also have 2 DLC packs that'll actually include playable units, 9 in each pack, and at least 2 of those 9 will be from the original Generation series, which is the ongoing Super Robot Wars series that doesn't use any licensed anime shows and whatnot, so it's their own universe. I forgot if they announced if these DLC playable units will be from unannounced series or not, or will be only selected from the pool of announced series. I forgot where they landed on that.
Yeah, it's not clear on the store page listings.
Yeah, but these DLC packs will have 13 stages each, and they'll be totally separate from the main campaign. So there's not going to be any story relevance, or it won't have any impact on the story and whatnot. I'm curious to see how this will pan out. I mean, I'm in for it. I got Ultimate Editions for PS4, and I'm about to get one on PC. Oh my god, they're pricey, but gotta support it. But I feel kind of mixed on this because it might cast a long shadow over the series if this is successful. It's like, is this going to be the thing going forward of like adding separate but playable units for even for an unannounced series? It's like, oh, maybe the series that you wanted got in, but only as DLC and not involved in the main scenario. So who knows? I'm curious to see how they execute this, but I'm hopeful it'll be not bad, hopefully. So that's kind of the thing I'm kind of iffy about. So that's wrapping up just the main details that they showed off on that live stream, Japanese live stream, for the official unveil of Super Robot Wars 30. Over in Japan, it's coming to PS4, Switch, and Steam. For the Southeast Asia release that Super Robot Wars V, X, and T released on, it'll also be on PS4 and Switch over there. So if you wanted an English version of the game, but you want it on a console, you still have to get the Southeast Asian region of the game, especially if you want a physical copy as well. So that was a cool stream, because after all that, they ended off with a concert with Jam Project, one of the big bands in Japan, especially for the super robot genre. That was great. So I think around Tuesday, as we were all cooling down for the Super Robot Wars news. It was great. It was awesome. And then we thought Super Robot Wars fans just thought, oh, okay, it's getting a Steam release, but only for the Southeast Asia region, like Super Robot Wars V and X, because that's how previous releases.
Yeah,
were.
my expectation was that was kind of like par for the course. Like, yeah, this is kind of similar to what you had kind of expected going in. Like, all right, this makes sense. I'll import a console version or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So that was the expectation, because Steam has very, very strict like region changing policies when you purchase games from other regions and try to play them. You have to use a VPN. It was more hassle than it's worth, honestly. But people were already consigned to, okay, there's only going to release on PC over in that region, just like usual. Oddly enough, Super Robot Wars T never got a Steam release. No one knows what the fuck happened to it. We still don't know why it doesn't have a PC release. But to this day, at this moment, doesn't have a PC release. So on Tuesday, some people noticed. I first heard about it when someone noticed, hey, there's a listings for Super Robot Wars 30 on the European Steam store. It's has a PEGI rating, a PEGI 7 rating. So it's like, is this real, or did they like
or is it a mistake?
Somehow? Yeah. I'm like, wait, so does that mean? So I went to go check the American Steam store, and I was like, oh wait, this has a listing too on the US PSN store, or not PSN store, Steam store, and it has a pending rating for the SRB. It's like, these are all unique trailers, because they have those pending ratings, or the PEGI 7 rating. I'm like, is there a possible release worldwide for this in the West? That's insane. And like, as more and more people were like looking into it, like more people confirmed, hey, it's up here in the Brazil, it's up here in Argentina, it's up here, like, everyone checked their regional stores, and it was like pretty much up everywhere. So the people looked into the Steam database. It's like the only region that is not going to be released for on PC is Venezuela. So other than that, everything else was good to go. I'm like, is this happening? And then the very next day, Bandai Namco Europe and Bandai Namco US confirmed that, like, yes, the Super Robot Wars 30 is coming worldwide simultaneously with the Japanese release. The only caveat is, if you're not getting the Southeast Asia English version for PS4 and Switch, is only available on Steam, but worldwide, so it's easily available for people. You don't have to go deal with having to get currencies for PSN Singapore or Hong Kong eShop. You don't have to do. You just have to go through Steam, and that's it. It's like, that's freaking amazing. This is a miracle, that, because that's one of the, like you mentioned earlier, this is one of those scenarios that's just like, this is inconceivable that this could happen. Like, whoever was the legal team behind this for Bandai Namco really, really, really shifted to the legal paperwork and like somehow argued their way out of, like, this could be possible, because if we really look into the copyright agreements for each of these series, we could actually argue our way out of this, and this is actually eligible to be released in this region. And somehow they made that work. And not only is like the game with all these series coming out, but they somehow were able to get all the other editions out. So as you mentioned earlier, the Ultimate Edition with all the licensed anime music is going to be available for all those regions through Steam as well. And that's Herculean effort.
If you go to the Steam page and go underneath the system requirements, normally it'll just say like copyright Square Enix or copyright the publisher or whoever. On Super Robot Wars, it has like Toei, it has Sunrise, it has like a whole bunch of different ones that so they made it all square up and line up and get it all sorted away so that it could happen.
Yeah, I'm still in shock. Like, we're so far away from this new, relatively speaking. Even like that was back on Tuesday, it still doesn't feel real to me, because I'm just like, that's insane. This has to be a dream still, because I followed the series for so long, and just to finally see a Super Robot Wars mainline release with anime titles on it in the West that's something I would never have dreamed of.
So has that never happened before?
A Super Robot Wars in the West has happened with the original generation. Atlus USA localized original generation 1 and 2 for Game Boy Advance way back when. but they were able to get away with it because those are just they don't have any licensed anime shows on it. The earliest one that got like an official English release was Super Robot Wars V for Southeast Asia, and that was like a big revelation at the time too. It's like, oh, they're getting official English releases, and they're not some fan translation. So that was cool, but everyone was like, okay, but the loophole is it's only available to Southeast Asia, so they're able to wrangle some maybe copyright law isn't as strong there as it isn't as strict there in Southeast Asia. So there's no way they can come to the West because of that. And somehow maybe the sales or the experiment of VXNT, the recent 3 Super Wars titles, somehow they were able to say, hey, this did really well in these releases, and we wonder if it's going to be maybe profitable this time to just do a worldwide release here, and maybe we'll just soak up the cost because the profit margin is just so high. There's money to be made if we make the initial investment here to just make it more available worldwide more easily. And now you have a lot of like people around the world saying, hey, I keep hearing about this series, now I can easily play this. Like, sure, why not? I'm interested to see check out the series. And especially they have a lot of titles like Gridman that a lot of people around the world that really loved. This will be a good like entryway for them into the series. It's fascinating. It's amazing. It's a miracle. It's crazy.
What I was trying to find, just as the last topic on this, is that I'm pretty sure that this showed up on the Steam bestsellers list, but it's not there anymore. But when the announcement was made and when the pre-purchase first went live, so I am curious, just basically to see, like, sometimes those PC market games that you weren't expecting can surprisingly be like massive hits. And I'm not saying Super Robot Wars will be or has to be a massive hit, but I'm wondering if it'll just find kind of like a cozy home in the global PC mind share.
Yeah, I got it ranked about as high as 4 or number 5 in the Steam bestsellers list, right below Death Stranding.
Yeah, it got into the top 10. Yeah,
it was crazy to see. It's like, this is wow. I had no idea, that it would rise so high. Like, the popularity or the interest is there, at least, for sure. This is not just the Super Wars series alone, because Bandai Namco has done this experiment before with G Generation Cross Rays, where same deal, where it had an English release for the Southeast Asia region for PS4 and Switch, but it actually got a Western release stealthily, but it did get a Western release, but for Steam only, and that seems to have done well for them. And I assume just it made too much sense. Like, hey, we're actually making money off of this market by releasing it worldwide. Let's do it with this game. And it's like, okay, sure, let's go, let's do it.
So and now we won't have any good excuse to leave this off of the depending on the quality of the game. We've always been able to kind of like sidestep when we go to the RPGs of the year, like, it didn't get an official Western release, so we can't really consider it. We can kind of like introduce it and talk about it and give it its due diligence, but that was kind of as far as we could go. But now it's like, no, it's here, it's available, it's on the list with everything else. So we'll have to see where it ends up at the end of the year relative to all the other RPGs.
Yeah, I really hope it's a great entry. It's shaping up to be one. That series list is pretty damn solid in my book. I hope people give it a shot. I'm really interested to see like what people think about the game, especially like newcomers, first timers. It's a really fun strategy RPG series. I love it. It's great. I'm very, 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 very happy about this.
We got an announcement of a new Bravely Default game. I feel like I'm slightly evil for introducing it that way. Square Enix has announced in the last week Bravely Default Brilliant Lights. This is a free-to-play mobile game as the 10th anniversary project for the Bravely Default series, which has cumulatively, I can't say English, sold 3 million units across its current entries. So we got a new trailer on the Japanese Square Enix YouTube page showcasing Bravely Default Brilliant Lights. And it's kind of like what you'd expect going in for a mobile entry in the series. It uses an art style very similar to Bravely Default 2. So less of the chibi look and more of the like Claytech Works look. It's a little bit of a hybrid. It looks more like built closer to Bravely Default 2 than the other entries, with cameos from all the other series entries. Eddie is in there and Elvis is in there. So this has been announced. No release date, but a closed beta test will take place soon in Japan. I don't know if there's any excitement on this amongst those of you that have more experience with the mobile entries for these sorts of games, or like the existing Bravely Default mobile projects. If any of you have put time into those,
This is a step up from the previous Bravely Default. I think what was the other one that recently? Well, not recently, but the last Bravely Default mobile game was a weird like pseudo MMO type deal because like you got for
Effect,
like
or whatever it was called.
yeah, I think that's what it was called because when you entered battles in that game, like other people in the field, like real players can show up in your battles and like fight alongside with you, and like it was always kind of a weird disjointed experience from when I played it just a little bit. I kind of dabbled like this is whatever. So seeing that looks more like a traditional Bravely Default game, I think is already a big step up from that entry. But it's hard for me to get excited because I would like to see these mobile games get local Western localizations, because from what I hear, that Octopath Traveler mobile game is really good, and from what little bit I've played it, I'm like, this seems really good, but my Japanese is not good enough to really follow along with like the story. Like it seems very intricate.
I remember when Champions of the Continent was announced, like I was really excited to play it, but it never really got an official English release, right?
No,
apparently Champions of the Continent makes some big changes to the Octopath formula that, were it not a mobile game, would like fix is maybe too strong a word, but heavily address some of the issues that people had with Octopath Traveler on Switch and PC.
I think a lot of people prefer the Champions of the Continent gameplay compared to like the vanilla, because
even like for story, like just one example for story like structure in Octopath Traveler, each story was tied to each of the protagonists, and what that ultimately ended up resulting in was that like your protagonist would be like the only character in the story, and they would never talk or even acknowledge any of the other protagonists that you had in your party. So kind of they're all like 8 disjointed stories, where apparently Champion of the Continent, there are 3 villains. And so the storylines are now branched and centered on the 3 villains, which allow like your characters now to actually communicate with each other. So
so that's why like these mobile game entries are cool. They seem neat, but I would like to see them release in the West. That's kind of what it all boils down to, because I never really stick with Japanese only mobile games. Just it doesn't, like, I don't feel like a sense of community, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
When I get into them. So,
but yeah, like the battle, like the trailer for this show is actually a fair bit of like actual gameplay, and it looks like, I know this sounds like this is basically just port begging, but like if this had an English localization and they put it on Switch or Switch and mobile devices, like I feel like this would find an audience, and it's just unfortunate that we just kind of have to like just not even consider it. Where it's like, well, wasn't announced for the West. Who knows if it'll ever come over? So just kind of put it out of sight, out of mind, unless
you have enough games
really into the series
already.
Yeah, and so it looks cool, and I always kind of liked how, I know a lot of people aren't a fan of it, but I kind of liked how Bravely Default 2 looked. It had like a unique art style that you don't see a lot of games try. I know some people immediately were like, oh, this mobile game uses that art style, I'm immediately not interested, which is fine. You're allowed to have that preference, but like if this was in English, I'd probably give it a try, because I kind of liked Bravely Default 2. But as it is, I don't speak Japanese, so I just have to wait until they announce an English version, if they ever do.
This is pure speculation, but I kind of have to wonder if Bravely Default 2 being greenlit hinged on that they already knew they were going to make a mobile game based off assets on it. So
very possible.
I don't know.
Good point.
Like, we'll make this console entry and then we'll follow it up with some of the art assets you make, because obviously art assets are by far the most consuming part of game development. Like, we'll use these in a mobile game, which, if it does well, could vastly out revenue Bravely Default 2.
We've had this conversation before, where it's just like the mobile game ends up being like the anchor financially, which then they use to like finance all the other projects. Here's something that's a little bit of a different sort of a news story that we typically cover on this podcast. So we want to be careful because we are not experts here. Originally reported in a Japanese entertainment blog, Nikon Taishu, we have learned some speculative insight about the future of RGG Studios' Judgment subseries. Obviously, we've talked about Lost Judgment releasing worldwide next month, in 2 months in September. We've talked about how that would pair with the Yakuza series. It would be the action branch of the studio's output going forward. Well, unfortunately, there might be a bit of a hiccup in there. So it seems like, based on an insider's information reported in Nikon Taishu in Japan, the Japanese actor Takuya Kimura, who is the face model and voice model for Judgment's protagonist Takayuki Yagami, is having a dispute with Sega about continuing the series based on his partnership with the talent agency Johnny's, or Johnny and Associates formerly. So the details here are kind of sparse, exactly what the disagreement is, but it seems like it ties into why the series doesn't have an official PC release that Sega really wants, about using the actors' likenesses in very controlled environments. That's why it's not available on PC, because they don't want the likeness to be able to be used in other, pulled out of the game and used wherever people desire. So basically, the hammer comes down that says Lost Judgment, because of this dispute between the actor Kimura and Sega and the talent agency Johnny's, Lost Judgment might be the last entry in this series. So what do we think about this? This is obviously we don't have all the details. We don't know what the contracts look like. This is in a lot of ways speculation, but
it makes a lot of sense. It's ridiculous enough that I buy it.
Yeah, I had never heard of Johnny's before, but then you see how specific magazines, entertainment magazines in Japan, literally cannot show. They have to show silhouettes of these actors when you're looking at a digital copy of the magazine, because they don't want the likeness to be pulled out of there. You have to get the hard copy, and so they literally just blank it out and show the silhouettes. And it's just if that's the level of control that they're expecting to have with their agents and with their clients. The fact that they say, well, extend that one further. We don't want, he's the face model and the voice actor for Yagami. Yeah, similar things with the how one of the characters in Yakuza 4, who's the police cadet in that game? I don't remember his name.
The protagonist there, that was part of the police force. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but
he couldn't show up in future games because of disputes with his actor. And then we saw in Judgment 1 with the drug accusation, one of the actors there had to have his model. Had to have his model completely altered. So basically, it seems like this isn't the first time that Sega and RGG Studios have run into the difficulties of hiring the likeness and the voice talents of these high-profile Japanese actors. But now it seems like this is where it's hitting the hardest, where it might result in the ending of a series prematurely. Especially we're less than a year away from them basically saying Judgment will be the action series going forward. And this doesn't necessarily, I would presume, this doesn't necessarily have to mean the end of the series, because they could change protagonists or they could shuffle other things around. But it seems like it was an unexpected roadblock.
It's unfortunate, because Nagoshi has already said, when the Lost of Judgment unveiled, and every piece of marketing with Judgment is we will not continue Judgment if Kimura wasn't involved with it.
All right.
The whole Judgment.
Yeah, he's outright said that he basically wrote the character for him alone.
Yeah, and it's not a simple, well, quote unquote simple. It's nowhere near simple for the development team, for sure. When they have to swap the models for both the Yakuza 4 cop character and for the Pierre Taki modeled character in the first Judgment, nowhere near a simple process. But you can't just simply model swap Kimura out because of his prominent role in the game as the protagonist too, because the identity of Judgment in those regions, in the Asian region and Japan, he is such a big celebrity and such a big central core focus of that series that it just kind of crumbles apart. And I don't know if you can make it'd be weird to make a new Judgment, like a Judgment 3 with a new protagonist. Not only without him, but what do you do with the previous Judgment releases are just they're still not going to get PC releases if you switch the protagonist to a new one. Maybe Judgment 3 could come to PC, but not the previous ones if they
Right.
switch the protagonist, because that's the deal that they made with Johnny's. For Kimura.
We don't know the language of the contract. Like they
Yeah.
might not be legally allowed to swap the model out. And just
So
to
the real-
assign names to Yakuza 4, because I felt bad glossing over it. The character was Masayoshi Tanamura, originally
Yes.
portrayed by Hiroki Narimiya, but then in the version available on PC now, he's got a new likeness, Toshiki Masuda. So I think if you go to like the modding scene on Steam, you can get the original model replaced, but it's all unofficial.
And I imagine I don't think Johnny's is what like keeps a close eye on like the PC market these days. But like you can easily extract models from even the PS4 model of Kimura into other games and whatnot. But
The thing with Johnny's,
recall a similar thing that happened, like the Johnny, not Johnny, the Keanu
Johnny
Reeves
Associate.
character, the Keanu Reeves character in Cyberpunk. People extracted his character out of that game, and for their own nefarious deeds. And I'm not saying that like Johnny's kept a tab on what happened to Keanu Reeves, but it's happened. It's already probably happened for Kimura's character with when you take the console release into account. But of course, people are going to use it for nefarious deeds. Of course, because that's what it is.
I think we're giving maybe a little bit too much credit to the agency here, considering they're the same agency that literally doesn't allow the likeness of their voice actors like in magazines. Like literally, you have pictures of them looking like in a locked character in a fighting game, because all you see is the silhouette next to real people, like in their pictures, because Johnny and Associates literally said, no, you can't show them.
I'm not saying that like Johnny's is right. I'm saying that that's just fact. That like that's already happened.
Yeah.
Of, like models getting extracted. That's just that's always been the landscape for PC in how many years, So their concerns aren't unfounded, but I think it's still a silly reason. And like you said, like the way they're so strict on controlling the likeness of their characters and their talents it's archaic, especially this year. But that's the way they run their agency, and it's hard to negotiate yourself out of that when you already signed a contract with them. And the only way to move forward is you either somehow reach a compromise and agree on something, or you pull out. And if all of this reporting is true, I am not envious for the Sega legal team that has to deal with this, because they have to keep the interests of Sega in mind. And at the end of the day, Sega wants to make money, and a good chunk of that money is the PC market. Oddly enough, I wonder how the Judgment to Stadia agreement went, because maybe Johnny doesn't know what Stadia is in the
they only showed the controller, and they're like, see, it's just like an Xbox.
Like, okay.
Maybe Sega pulled a fast one on Google, saying, yeah, we'll sign a contract not to release Judgment on PC if you give us money. We totally
it is
were
interesting to
planning
think
on
about
it.
like what happened behind the scenes. But the thing is that Judgment, the original Judgment, was on Stadia, but Lost Judgment hasn't been announced for it. So it's kind of just like a weird footnote in this whole saga.
It would be, I don't know. Obviously, no one knows how Lost Judgment ends and how the game is, but it would be an incredible shame if this would be the last entry, because Judgment is such a cool series, and for a lot of people in the Yakuza fandom, like that, this is their favorite entry. And recall that Judgment was supposed to be the brawler series moving forward, while Yakuza continues its turn-based RPG trend. So this is awkward. This is such an awkward situation, and hopefully things work out in favorable and in a world where we hopefully see Judgment gets a release on PC. Without any sort of legal thing binding them from doing it. Kimura is such a cool character in that game. I really, really enjoy his character. Yagami is an awesome protagonist.
During this week, we got the announcement and release of the long-awaited NieR Automata on Steam PC patch. So obviously, earlier this year, NieR Automata released on the Microsoft Store on PC from a different porting studio, and it seems like out of the box, it was a better port than the original Steam release from the original launch. And this resulted, we talked about this on the podcast, this resulted in tons of, in my opinion, justified review bombing, where they weren't promised a patch, but like Square Enix had told consumers back at launch to stay tuned, and then nothing ever happened, and the original PC port just kind of languished. And then here, all of a sudden, they had a better option available to them on a different platform. Well, they finally followed through, and the new patch is now available and live on Steam for NieR Automata. I have not downloaded this. I don't think anyone here has. I have kind of poured through some of the Steam forum discussions just to see what the consensus is, just try to see the varying opinions. And you always get the people who are just like, well, when you use the fan mod, that FAR mod, fixed automata resolution mod, that has been around since launch, that people have always kind of swore by, like it's still better with the mod. But based on what I've read and what the initial impressions seem to be, it seems like the new patch is pretty damn comprehensive, pretty damn good. No longer having stuttering cutscenes, no longer having a locked 720p resolution. There seems to be a few niggling issues with ambient occlusion and with some frame rate limiters. It sounds like the FAR mod author, Cal Dian, is going to update it to try to patch up the new version of the game. But I think Adam, if you haven't listened to that old episode of the podcast where we talked about this, I think Adam kind of put it best, where it was kind of a blemish on Square Enix's catalog to have such a much maligned game with such a poor user rating just sitting on the storefront. So it's maybe a little bit too little too late, depending on your perspective, but I think this is a good move. It's not perfect. Some people will still swear by the mod. It seems good and smart and prudent to kind of have addressed those lingering concerns that had been ignored. So I did mention,
better late than never, right?
Yeah, I did mention that once, since I had kind of played the two games backwards, quote unquote, that I was interested in revisiting Automata now that I've played through Replicant. So I guess maybe in the future, maybe later this year or early next, because I played through Automata on PC with the FAR mod, so I don't get a ton from this patch, and I think a lot of people who play the game on PC won't get a ton, but it's just nice to know that you can suggest to people, yes, this game is a great game, and you don't feel obligated to say, but asterisk, you have to have this. It's like some people will still think you should have it, you should consider it, but it seems like it works much better out of the box, and it seems like most of the impressions that I've read through have been pretty damn positive. So I guess kudos to Square Enix for finally coming through on NieR Automata on Steam.
Well, there is that group of people that would refuse to use any kind of mods, who will just play the game how it is. So I guess that group base is benefit hugely from it, I would say.
Well, having a working product out of the box, I think, is definitely, like, regardless of how much you can soup it up with fan efforts, with passion projects, with modding, tools, if it doesn't work out of the box as well, like you expect it to, that's just undeniably not good. The fact that we no longer have to feel obligated to include that caveat, because that was our game of the year, right? So now we don't have to say, but don't get it on Steam without the mod. We don't have to have that consideration anymore, at least not to the same extent. So good to see. Better late than never.
It was a long time coming, but we got there.
Took almost 4 years, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's been that long. We got an announcement of a new Monster Hunter project, and I did not know about this until right before the podcast. This is the announcement of Monster Hunter's Legends of the Guild, a Netflix original Monster Hunter project with CG that I think might be an acquired taste. So, James, I don't know if you're interested in this much at all, but did you have any takes on what you saw on this trailer here, or maybe this is a Josh question? The Legends of the Guild Netflix project.
Yeah. The most interesting thing about this is that this was announced years ago, and I'm pretty sure everyone had assumed that it was just dead. So I watched the trailer, and I don't know. I'll be honest. I've seen some folks saying, "Oh man, it looks so good! I'm so excited!" And it's I just don't see it. The CG and the animations in the trailer just give me really heavy Uncanny Valley vibes, and doesn't look good. Maybe it's just me. Maybe Josh or someone else in here has a different impression of it if they've seen the trailer. But just I watch it and it's like, yeah, I'm good. I really don't need to see this.
Yeah, I watched it. I'm like, hopeful. If people say it's amazing, I'll watch it. But if I don't hear anything about this when it comes out, then I'll pass.
It gives me like Final Fantasy PS2 CG vibes or like Shrek vibes. It doesn't look that bad. It's more technically impressive than that, but the style of it kind of looks like that. Where it looks like the people like made of clay and they like have like exaggerated proportions, which maybe that's better than trying to shoot for photorealism, but I think they might have swung too low.
You know what I like about Monster Hunter? I like playing Monster Hunter. I don't necessarily like watching Monster Hunter.
It seems like it could have some fans who was like, oh, I saw Devil Joe in the trailer or whatever, or like, oh, the Palico character could be cute.
I didn't watch the Hollywood movie, so I have no reason to watch this one. I'm just not interested in watching Monster Hunter stories play out. I go into Monster Hunter to play the games. Really, that's about it.
Yep.
Yeah. So this will premiere on August 12th. So it'll be in a month and a half. You can watch this
for what it's worth, whatever it's worth. The studio behind this is the same studio as Lego Movie.
Oh boy,
which I find kind of amusing in a way because like Lego Movie didn't have like human proportion characters either. So it's
the Lego Movie. I thought people I've seen the first one. I haven't seen the second one. People praised it for how it took that art style.
The only thing I was getting at is like in Monster Hunter, you have normal proportion characters. In Legos, you have Lego characters. So it's just kind of interesting. Like, okay, so this is the Monster Hunter movie. Obviously, you're going to have normal human characters, and it seems like that's the point of contention that people are taking most issue with, is that like the humans look kind of weird.
Watch the Lego Movie instead, maybe. But I don't know. I feel bad judging this.
What about this? What about this? What if they make a Lego Monster Hunter movie?
I'd watch it.
That's something I would watch. Yeah. So, hey, you know what? I'll give you that idea for free, Hollywood.
But yeah, August 12th. If maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be surprisingly good. Maybe it'll be better than the Hollywood movie.
That's not difficult.
I'm about to say like no, better than hopefully.
Hopefully it'll be less racist than the Hollywood movie.
One would hope.
I remember that scene. All right, we got a few other trailers for some upcoming games that we'll just kind of rattle through quickly. I had kind of preempted this earlier. We got a new character introduction spotlight for Tales of Arise. This is for the brawler character that uses like knuckle fist types weapons, Law. We already got the character spotlights for the two protagonists, Elfin and Shion. This Law trailer, I think, is fine, except for the fact that the English version, I don't like the voice actor. I don't know. It's exactly what you expect it to be. No surprises. He has some dialogue, some cutscenes with him. He's shown to be really distrustful of Shion because she's an other. She's from the other, I forget the name of the world that she's from, but he's initially distrustful, doesn't like that Elfin is putting some like confiding in her, etc. Some combat snippets of how he fights, things like that. It's a character trailer.
It looks really fun to play. I want to play all these characters so far. All the battle footage they've shown so far. I'm just like, I just want to play the damn game. This looks too fun. Stop doing this. If it just the next time I want to hear about Tales of Arise, it better be like it's a demo today. You can go play it. That'd be great. Please.
And visually, the game still looks really good. So the combat looks fast and fun. But yeah, character trailer. So I guess expect 3 more of those. This trailer is maybe inherently more interesting. The big Shin Megami Tensei V story trailer. This is basically 4 minutes of pure cutscenes, some gameplay. I've watched this having not played any other Shin Megami Tensei game, other than Persona 4, if you even count that. And I've seen some people say that this story trailer, has a lot of spoilers in it. But I feel like I'm so lost that I can't even, I'm too dumb to spoil myself because I don't know, what things are being referenced or what things I should be excited about, certain demon designs or certain character archetypes being presented. But I thought the trailer was really damn cool.
Certain anime openings, right? It's like, do you count that as a spoiler, or it's like sometimes you don't have the context? It's like, can I even treat it as a spoiler if you don't know the context?
Well, for a little bit of series context, so SMT games always have, maybe not always, but almost always have multiple endings, and there's usually tied to an ending a certain character, this is their route. like you have the law character or the chaos character or whatever. So that's not really new. And people are basically taking this trailer and sort of based on the dialogue and based on what's said, they're like, oh, this guy must be the law guy in the law route, and this guy must be the chaos guy in the chaos route. So people are, based on what they know how the series games are typically structured and based on what they show here, just sort of putting two and two together, assuming which characters might be tied to different philosophies that tie to the different game routes. Is what
That's a lot of
people are
speculation.
doing.
At the end of
Yeah.
the day, like, who knows? Who freaking knows? I'm excited. This trailer continues.
I love the
ongoing
art
narrative.
style.
Yeah, SMT5 has been strongly shown, and even daily they have these Demon Daily videos that shows off a demon in the game and some footage. But this trailer looks great. Like it really nailed home that, hey, people, you don't have to worry about just a wasteland environment in this game, because I know there were some worries about it adopting the Nocturne philosophy of like, hey, it's only gonna be wastelands. You're only going to go through sandy or deserted type regions. Like this trailer is full of varied environments, from swamps to you're going through like some haunted school, through you're going through snowy regions. It was filled with that. We saw a lot more of like demons actually living in this world. So there's like the sequence, very brief but really stuck out to me, of like a mixture of like Pretas and Kodamas and other demons like praising an Asperis in their community. So there's some form of like belief or religion type deal with some demon communities in this world. So like that's like these cool little touches that's just like this feels like it feels lived in. It feels like you're actually in a place, and like you're just exploring around, seeing like this now deserted world just filled with demons. Like they actually have communities, and
It's really fun to see, because there have been a lot of SMT games, but almost always, just based on technical limitations, really.
Yeah.
You never saw the demons in the environment. They'd only show up in battle, and if they were in the environment, it would just be like a basic model just standing there or whatever, like in Nocturne. So like being able to see the sort of meshing of the demon models with the environment, and even the games, even like making sure the sizes are nice and varied. Like there's a gigantic cert that shows up right at the front of the trailer,
and
really cool.
The cert is like that like multiple building demon that has like a flame sword, and then that's that cert. That was cool.
It's cool to see stuff like that. It almost, I know this is maybe a weird comparison, but it almost reminds me of like what people want to see with like Pokemon games. Like they want to see Pokemon in the environment rather than just like coming out of Pokeballs or whatever. And it's just cool to see like all these classic demons that people who have played the series are really familiar with, just kind of interacting with the environment, like with each other, things like that. It's just really cool to see, like finally, in a way.
It was interesting to see that one of the cover art demons, the yellow one, show up in the trailer, and like let's see some sort of like the Law faction. It's like leading like this gigantic force of angels or powers, I guess. That's the specific demon name, Power. Like they show up like in a military diamond formation against like an incoming. It looks like Lucifer or. It's so there's certainly some sort of like ongoing war as you're progressing through the game, whether that's like shows up actively or not. We saw a good focus of this trailer that Adam and I were talking about was there's some sort of like headquarters environment that you're occasionally visiting, and it's like the Nahobino is separated into like the Aogami and the main character for this instance in this headquarters scene, and like this security chief that really strongly resembles Aogami, and there's like who knows what that's about, and you're not the only human there. There's like you and like as you were saying, like there are friends with you. There's this a guy that wears glasses. Yeah, there's a prominent female character that wants to stop the fighting. You have this blonde character present, and then there's this other scene where you have the glasses character and another character with a green scarf, speaking in the subway, and then there's also these scenes where you're going to school with them, and it looks kind of sort of a delusion or a dream almost. It's so, of course, it's all presented to you with no context. So you're just like kind of left with kind of puzzling things together, leaving it up to imagination. I thought it was a really effective trailer, and it showed off what Magatsuhi skills are. So a lot of when the debut trailer was shown at E3, the E3 Nintendo Direct, people noticed right away. It's like, oh, during battles you have this Magatsuhi meter. What the hell is this? And then you use this resource for specific skills in combat. So they showed off like one that a very powerful skill. It looks like I think it's called Fairy Banquet, where you use this Magatsuhi skill to immediately get everyone's buffs up to max, all their stats to max, basically, for that battle, and that looks very useful. But then there are other more flashier Magatsugi attacks, where the Naobino just like goes full on anime. It's like kind of has this swirling whirlwind sword going down on enemies. It looks bonkers.
Yeah, I misspoke at the top. Like the trailer opens and ends with cutscenes, but there's a good like 60 seconds of raw gameplay footage, including battle and overworld gameplay. So it does show a fair bit of both sides, and it looks fun as hell. I'll just put it that way.
This is kind of nitpicking at this point, but I do feel like there were some moments in the trailer where you could almost see the game like struggling a little bit in terms of frame rate.
Yeah,
I do sort of hoping that that's not too big a deal being on Switch like most of the time, but there were a few moments in the trailer where I did catch that. I'm like, it's like my worry. So,
but the game still looks very solid. You could dissect the trailer for hours and hours on end, but it looks great. I'm excited. I'm very excited. November 12th, I think, right? Still? Yep.
We got a localization announcement for a game that was announced earlier this year, and that is NieR America is publishing The Cruel King and the Great Hero in early 2022 for the West, for PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. So Nippon Ichi announced this for Japan earlier this year, but now we get the official announcement from NieR America for the localization. This is from the same team that did The Liar Princess and The Blind Prince. And I don't know much about this game, The Cruel King and the Great Hero, but it has like a really kind of poignant trailer with a really sad premise that I feel like could like be really like heart-wrenching in a good way, like like a good sad story, like potentially sad story, where it's this dragon basically acting as like this foster father to a young girl who he is raising so that she can one day defeat him. So just that's the premise in a sentence. And it just seems like, man, that's a striking idea for a game, for a story. So the announcement trailer is really just trying to get you a feel for the artwork and for the two characters, the dragon and the girl. But I think Adam has mentioned this on previous podcasts, where it's just cool that NieR America gives these little independent projects, these little interesting one-off ideas, space and breathing room, despite the fact that they're not like big franchises or they're not like these giant projects. Just these little interesting ideas, like Void Terrarium and Liar Princess. So,
not to mention last year's stuff like Mad Rat Dead. It's like that's one of the things that I actually really appreciate about NIS, and I hope that despite all the signs that they pull through, they're one of the last real like AA developers on Japan's side, or in general even, that really have a lot of creative freedom in the IPs that they make, the games they make, and it's cool to see stuff like this coming out of them. I wish it was Labyrinth of Galleria localization announcement, but definitely still nice to see more of these games coming west.
As you said, that's one of the like admirable things about Nippon Ichi. Like, a lot of people just associate them like, when's the next Disgaea? But they're definitely one of the last bastions of just like releasing brand new titles consistently without they're not tied to a previous series. They're not afraid to just like, hey, we have a neat idea that we'd like to share. Let's release it, see how it does. And I'm not going to say that they're all hits every time, but it's cool to see that someone's doing different. There's
Poison Control was one of those, wasn't it? Not quite a hit, but an idea. But yeah, this did, I guess, already released in Japan in June. but early 2022. It's hard to say for some reason. 2022 for us in the West.
Not a
So
real year.
Yeah, I really the storybook style and the premise, like it's the sort of game you know exactly how it's going to end, but it seems like it could be pretty like compelling, charming, tragic sort of story, bittersweet.
And then finally, we got a release date announcement. This is for the Caligula Effect 2. So it released in Japan also in June, but its Western release will be October 19th in North America and October 22nd in Europe. So another one for the holiday season. I don't know if we've gotten a lot of impressions from the Japanese release. I know a lot of people here weren't really high on the original release, but maybe this game is an opportunity to correct on the mistakes of the initial version of the game.
I'm trying to get through the Caligula Effect overdose. I swear, now that I've done the AI Somnium Files, maybe that's the next one on my backlog that maybe I should try to get through in time for this, because I haven't heard bad things about Caligula Effect 2. I don't know much about Caligula Effect 2.
I've heard some pretty good impressions actually. So quick history. I played the Vita version of Caligula, and I felt that game honestly kind of sucked. But I know some people, even if it's like with caveats, swear that the Overdose version is a lot better, not just performance-wise, which alone is huge, but a lot of the additions made just let things make more sense or fleshed out quite a bit more. So I want to like try it. I'm still kind of like reeling though from the Vita version. So I'm not, my interest is not at zero for the sequel.
Yeah, but I want to have context for it, and I don't think watching the anime is really that will help for it. So I'm like, I gotta. I wonder if this is a long game. I have no idea how long Overdose is.
I will trust you guys to bear the burden and tell me if this game's any good. But yeah, that covers it for news for this week. So thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. As always, you can visit us on rpgsite.net, our main website, where we covered all the things that we talked about today, along with some of the older features and some of the reviews from the last month, including Monster Hunter Stories 2 and some of the guides for that game. You can always visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/rpgsite, our Twitter page @rpgsite, and also on Facebook and Instagram under the same name. We're here seemingly every week, so we'll continue to kind of adjust and play with the early format depending on how many people we have on the podcast on any given week. Thank you so much for listening. Try to stay cool, stay safe, and we'll talk to you next week.
And play Super Robot Wars.